So when you make a decision, whether it's what to eat for lunch or who to marry or even just how to run your business,
Right.
do you actually think you're in the driver's seat? I mean, we all really like to believe that we are these highly logical, rational creatures.
Oh, absolutely. We think we're perfectly in control.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're navigating the world with this perfect, I don't know, subconscious cost-benefit analysis going on in our heads. But what if a horrific, completely life-altering explosion proved that everything we know about our own logic is just, well, that it's completely wrong?
And it's exactly what we're getting into today. Because standard economics,
Mm.
and honestly society at large, just assumes human beings are these rational calculators.
Right, like robots almost.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
But reality shows that we actually make these astonishingly simple mistakes every single day. And the craziest part isn't just that we make them, but that we make them in the exact same ways, over and over.
Which is just wild to think about. So for today's deep dive, we are doing a really engaging sort of frame-by-frame breakdown of the introduction to Dan Ariely's groundbreaking work, Predictably Irrational.
It's such a foundational piece of work.
It really is. And the mission here is simple, really. You are about to learn how a devastating personal injury actually birthed a completely new way of looking at human behavior.
A total paradigm shift.
Exactly. And understanding this shift, from assuming humans are purely rational to realizing we are, quote, predictably irrational, it's honestly the ultimate shortcut for anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship or just making better choices in life.
Because it reveals the invisible forces, right?
Yeah.
The ones that actually dictate how your customers, your employees, and, well, how you yourself make decisions.
Yeah, you can't escape it.
Hmm.
So let's set the scene here, because the origin of all this is incredibly intense. It's a normal Friday afternoon for an 18-year-old guy in Israel.
Just a totally average day.
Right. And then suddenly his entire world is completely shattered by the explosion of a large magnesium flare.
And we should clarify, a magnesium flare it's not a small firecracker.
No, not at all.
It burns at thousands of degrees. It's catastrophic. The result of this specific explosion was that 70% of his body was covered in third-degree burns.
70%. I mean, it's hard to even wrap your head around that level of trauma.
It really is. And the aftermath was just brutal. For 3 years, he is essentially wrapped in bandages. 3 whole years.
Wow.
Yeah. And when he could finally be somewhat mobile, he had to wear this incredibly tight synthetic suit and a face mask. He actually described it himself as making him look like a crooked version of Spider-Man.
Which is such a vivid, kind of heartbreaking image, honestly. But the physical trauma, as horrific as it is, it leads to this intense psychological shift, right?
Exactly. Because think about his life. He's 18. He should be out with friends, participating in all those normal, everyday social activities.
Going to parties, dating, all of that.
Right. But instead, he is completely separated from society.
Yeah.
And because of that isolation, he starts observing normal human behaviors, things we all just take for granted, as if he were an outsider from a totally different planet.
It's like he became the ultimate anthropologist, but the strange foreign tribe he was studying was literally his own life.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
He started questioning the why behind literally everything. Like, why do we care so much about what people think of us? Or why do we love one person and not another?
Just breaking down the code of human interaction.
Exactly. He even started noticing things in the hospital. Like, why are the routines and the schedules designed entirely for the comfort of the physicians rather than the patients?
Which is a huge realization. And it makes me think, doesn't it often take a massive disruption to our routine for us to actually notice the water we're swimming in?
Oh, 100%. When you're in it, you're just reacting.
Right. Like, think about it in a business context. Entrepreneurs often get so caught up in the day-to-day doing of their business that they completely forget to observe what's actually happening.
They lose the big picture.
Yeah. So Ariely's forced pause here, it's kind of akin to a founder being forced to take a huge step back from daily operations. Like, suddenly you're observing the customer journey from a completely alien perspective.
And that is such a crucial practical takeaway for anyone listening. To truly understand the motivations of the people around you, whether that's your clients, your team, your family, you occasionally need to deliberately distance yourself.
Just step out of the bubble.
Yeah, you have to observe their behaviors as if you are seeing human society for the very first time. It's the only way to spot the hidden patterns.
That makes total sense. Now, I want to dive into a specific part of his hospital routine because it illustrates this perfectly, though it's pretty brutal. It's about the daily bandage bath.
Oh, right. The bath. It sounds benign, but it really wasn't.
Not at all. So every single day, he had to undergo this bath where he was soaked in a harsh disinfectant, and then his bandages were literally stripped off to remove dead skin.
And because he essentially had no skin left in those areas, the pain was it was indescribable.
Just agonizing. And the nurses who did this, they had a very specific method. Their theory was that they needed to grip the bandages and rip them off as fast as humanly possible.
Right, which is, I mean, we've all heard that logic, right?
Yeah.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Exactly.
The nurses genuinely believed that a vigorous tug, which creates a really sharp, short spike of pain, was preferable to a slow peeling, which would extend the duration of the whole ordeal.
Which on paper maybe sounds logical.
On paper, sure. They also believed it didn't matter if you started on the most painful part of the body or the least. To them, it was just a physical task to get through quickly.
But Ariely, being the one actually experiencing this torture, completely disagreed with their theory based on his lived experience.
Oh, completely, because he realized the nurses were completely ignoring the psychological components of pain.
Like what, specifically?
Well, primarily the anticipatory fear.
Oh, the dread.
Exactly. The psychological torment of unpredictable pain. If you don't know exactly when the rip is coming or how bad the next rip will be, your anxiety just skyrockets. And they also ignored the comfort that comes with knowing pain will gradually reduce over time. By ripping randomly and quickly, they maximize the trauma.
It's so interesting. It reminds me of like a really smart friend who gives terrible relationship advice because they have absolutely no empathy for the actual emotional experience of a breakup.
Yes, exactly. They're just looking at the mechanics of it.
Right. But it raises a huge question. I mean, these nurses weren't malicious.
Yeah, not at all. They were highly experienced professionals.
So how can experts who do this every single day for years be so completely wrong about the reality of the people they're serving?
That is the crucial insight here. It highlights the massive flaw of expert intuition. When you're the one administering the process, not experiencing it, your intuition is completely warped by your own goals.
Which, for the nurses, was efficiency.
Exactly. Let's connect this to a real-world scenario. Imagine a business launching a huge product update.
Oh, like a totally new interface or something.
Right. The developers, the experts might think that making a radical, sudden change to the user interface is the best approach. Just push the update all at once. Rip the bandage off.
Because it's easier for the dev team.
Yes. But in doing so, they completely ignore the anxiety, the frustration, the disruption that the actual user experiences during that sudden transition.
Wow. So the practical takeaway there is, never blindly trust best practices or expert intuition just because of tenure.
Never. Experience does not automatically equal truth. Especially, and this is key, especially when that experience is completely disconnected from the end user's emotional reality.
That is so powerful. So Ariely has this realization he fundamentally disagrees with the nurses, but he's just a patient. How does he actually prove he's right?
Well, that leads us to the next chapter of his life, which is his empirical awakening.
At Tel Aviv University, right?
Exactly. He enrolls at the university and takes a class on the physiology of the brain with a professor named Hanan Frank.
And this is where he has a massive light bulb moment about what science actually is.
Yeah, because up until then, he probably thought of science as just a textbook of facts you memorize. But Professor Frank showed him that science is an empirical endeavor. It's an active process of questioning.
I love the dynamic between them. From what I understand, when Ariely would suggest alternative theories in class, Professor Frank didn't just shut him down or pull rank.
Which is so rare in academia.
Honestly, totally rare. Instead, Frank would challenge him. He'd say, okay, that's an interesting idea. Propose an empirical test to prove it.
He essentially said, put your money where your mouth is, design an experiment.
Which leads to the rat experiment. And this story is just incredible. Ariely wanted to test a specific theory about epilepsy, but because of his severe burn injuries, his hand movements were super limited. He couldn't physically do the microscopic surgery on the rats.
Right, he needed help.
So his best friend, Ron Weisberg, steps up. And the crazy thing is, Ron is an avid vegetarian.
And a massive animal lover.
Right. So doing surgery on 50 rats is literally his nightmare. But he showed the ultimate test of friendship. He spent his weekends for months helping Ariely operate on these rats to test this theory.
It's an amazing level of dedication.
Yeah.
And the outcome of all that work is just the best part of the story.
Because his theory was completely, unequivocally wrong.
Dead wrong. He spent months on it, And the data proved his idea was a total bust.
But the irony, the beauty of it, is that Ariely wasn't depressed about it. He was thrilled.
He was absolutely ecstatic.
Which sounds crazy to most people. It's like a startup pivoting, right?
Exactly.
If you launch a feature and it totally fails, discovering that you are completely wrong with high certainty is incredibly valuable.
It's not a failure at all.
Right, it's data. It tells you exactly where not to go next.
And that's exactly how an entrepreneur should look at testing a marketing channel. Instead of sitting in a boardroom arguing for hours about whether a campaign will work based on gut feelings.
Just run a small test.
Exactly, run the test. The scientific method is the ultimate arbiter of truth in business, just like it is in science. Don't debate ideas. Create empirical tests for your beliefs. Finding out you are wrong with absolute certainty is a massive step forward.
So, armed with this new superpower, the scientific method, Ariely decides he's going to finally test the nurse's theory about pain.
He goes right back to the bandage bath debate.
Yes. So he sets up these lab experiments, and obviously he can't burn people, so he induces physical pain using heat, cold water, physical pressure, loud sounds.
He even tested the psychological pain of losing money in the stock market.
Wow, so he's really mapping out human suffering in a controlled environment.
Very rigorously. And the findings from these experiments completely broke down the reality of pain. Ariely proved that his subjective feeling in that bathtub was scientifically correct.
The slow pull is better.
Yes. People suffer significantly less overall trauma if treatments are carried out with lower intensity and a longer duration, rather than high intensity and short duration.
So the nurses were just objectively wrong.
Completely wrong. Pulling the bandages slowly, starting with the least painful areas to build tolerance, it would have been vastly superior.
Okay, so he has the data, he proved it, and then there's this incredibly poignant moment where he actually returns to the burn unit.
Yeah, he goes back to present his findings to the medical staff, specifically to his favorite nurse, Eddie.
Which has to be a pretty tense moment, right? Coming back to tell the people who tortured you, even with good intentions, that they are doing it wrong.
Definitely. But Eddie's reaction is fascinating. She looks at the data, and she admits that they should change their methods. She concedes the point.
But then she drops a bombshell.
She does. She reveals a massive blind spot that Ariely, even with all his rigorous testing, completely missed. She pointed out the nurse's psychological pain.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. Ripping the bandages quickly. It wasn't really about the patient's pain. It was the nurse's unconscious way of shortening their own torment.
Because they have to hear these people scream.
Exactly. Hearing a patient scream in agony for an extended period of time is deeply traumatizing for the caregiver. By ripping the bandage fast, they shortened the duration of the screaming. They were subconsciously protecting their own mental health.
That is just an absolute tragedy.
It really is.
I mean, their inherent biases, their own need for self-preservation completely blinded them to reality. They convinced themselves it was best for the patient when really it was best for them.
It's a profound insight into human nature.
It really makes you think, like, if highly compassionate, incredibly experienced professionals can systematically misunderstand the consequences of their behavior,
Yeah.
what hope do the rest of us have?
Honestly, it's a wake-up call. It means you absolutely must actively seek out your own blind spots. Even if you think your intentions are perfectly pure, your subconscious desire to avoid your own discomfort might be causing you to do real harm.
Like giving a bad employee good feedback just because you personally hate the awkwardness of conflict.
Exactly. You rationalize it as being a supportive manager, but really, you're just avoiding your own pain, and you're delivering a terrible experience to your team.
That is such a huge trap. And this whole realization, this is the grand epiphany that launches his entire career, right?
It is. This is the birth of behavioral economics.
Mm-hmm.
Ariely reasoned that if these highly trained nurses were repeatedly making the wrong decisions, and crucially, failing to learn from their experience,
Then we all must be doing it.
exactly, humanity as a whole must be making these systematic errors.
So let's break that down because I want to contrast this with standard economics because standard economics views humans completely differently.
Oh, it's a completely different universe.
Yes.
Standard economics, which is what most everyday people kind of subconsciously believe in too, views humans through the lens of Shakespeare's Hamlet.
Right, the quote about how noble in reason man is.
Yes, how infinite in faculty. Standard economics assumes we compute the value of all options perfectly.
We're basically walking spreadsheets.
Exactly. And it assumes that if we do make a mistake, market forces will instantly correct it. But behavioral economics steps in and says, that is incredibly naive.
Because we're not rational.
No, we are highly irrational, but, and this is the core of his book's title, we are predictably irrational.
Our mistakes aren't just random flukes.
Right, they are systematic. We make the same mistakes over and over in very specific patterns.
And Ariely uses this brilliant analogy in the text, comparing these behavioral experiments to microscopes or strobe lights.
I love that analogy.
Me too.
Yeah.
Because he says experiments slow down human behavior to a frame-by-frame narration. They isolate the invisible forces acting on us.
Like turning on a strobe light in a dark club. You suddenly see exactly where everyone's foot is landing.
Exactly. And if you think about it, if we are constantly making the same mistakes, isn't that a massive opportunity?
How so?
Well, if your rationality is a pattern, it means we can decode it. We can predict it.
Oh, absolutely. That is the whole point of the field. Once you see the pattern, you can design around it.
Right. And he drops these great teasers in the introduction about the kinds of patterns we fall into. Like, why do we genuinely promise to go on a diet? We're totally committed on Sunday night, but then we fail spectacularly the second the dessert cart rolls by on Monday.
Because in standard economics, that makes no sense. Your preferences wouldn't just flip like that.
Exactly. Or, why do we feel better after taking a 50-cent aspirin compared to a 1-cent aspirin, even when they are literally the exact same medicine?
The placebo effect of pricing, it's fascinating.
It's wild. Or even corporate fraud. Why does simply asking people to recall the 10 Commandments right before they have the opportunity to cheat suddenly curb Enron-like behavior?
These aren't just random anecdotes. They are systematic glitches in how our brains are wired.
Right. And the practical takeaway from all this is that you have to stop expecting people, including yourself, to act perfectly rationally.
It's an impossible standard.
It is. You have to design your business, your products, your entire life around how humans actually behave. You have to account for the flaws, the biases, and all the emotional baggage we bring to the table.
And that ties everything together so beautifully.
Yeah.
The soul of this entire chapter is a journey from profound tragedy to ultimate clarity.
It really is.
Ariely's horrific burns stripped away his normal life. They forced him to become an outsider. But that outsider perspective, when he combined it with the rigorous strobe light methodology of the scientific method, it revealed a massive truth.
That our irrationality is structured.
Yes, it is not a random collection of senseless mistakes. It is a structured, predictable part of the human condition. And acknowledging that we are flawed is not depressing.
No, not at all.
It's actually the most empowering thing we can do, because predictable flaws can be planned for, they can be managed, and they can be overcome.
That is exactly right. If you know the pothole is always on that corner, you can finally steer around it. So, now that we know the human brain is practically hardwired to make these systematic errors, we have to ask, what is the very first entirely invisible trap we all fall into every single time we look at a price tag?
Oh, it's a good one.
Next time, we're going to look at the incredible truth about relativity. We'll explore exactly why you were perfectly happy to drop $4 on a fancy cup of coffee without even thinking about it, but then you'll spend 20 minutes agonizing over clipping a coupon to save 25 cents on a can of soup.
It's going to completely change how you look at shopping.
It really is. Until then, keep questioning your assumptions. When it comes to making decisions, you probably think you are fully in control. You weigh your options, calculate the value, and make a rational choice.
Right. That's the assumption.
But what if your brain doesn't actually possess an internal value meter at all? Like, what if you only ever know what something is worth when it's placed right next to something else?
Yeah, it completely shatters how we view human agency. I mean, the whole basis of classical economics is this idea of the perfectly rational human. Someone who always knows exactly how much utility a product has and exactly what they're willing to pay for it.
Welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We're looking specifically at Chapter 1 of Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational, which is called The Truth About Relativity.
It's such a brilliant chapter.
It really is. So today, we are going to learn how invisible forces like decoy pricing and relative comparisons secretly skew our reasoning every single day. For anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship, understanding this is a total game changer, because once you see how easily human choices are manipulated by their surroundings, you can design better products, market more effectively, and, stop falling for these traps yourself.
Exactly. And the data here reveals that we really do not have an internal calculator. We are basically blind to absolute value. We rely entirely on our environment to give us context.
Which is just wild to think about. To understand how this works, the text uses this amazing metaphor. It compares the human mind trying to make a decision to an airplane pilot trying to land in the dark.
Yeah, that pilot metaphor is perfect. Imagine you were landing a plane at night, pitch black. You can't just guess where the runway is.
No, that would be a disaster.
Right. You need those localized immediate lights, the runway lights on either side of the tarmac, to guide your descent. And the human brain does the exact same thing with valuation.
Yeah.
Figuring out the absolute value of something takes a massive amount of cognitive energy.
Like you'd have to strip away the environment, analyze the parts, factor in the labor, project the future utility. It's just exhausting.
It's too much math. Our brains evolved to conserve energy, not to do complex algebra for every single choice. So we use a shortcut, a heuristic. Instead of asking, what is this item actually worth? We just ask, is it better or worse than the thing sitting right next to it?
Okay, let's unpack this, because we experience this all the time. It's like looking at a white paint swatch on a blank wall versus putting it next to the ceiling trim. The color doesn't change, but your perception totally shifts.
Oh, absolutely.
But I want to look at the classic TV showroom scenario from the text. So, say I walk into an electronics store. I am not an audiovisual engineer. I don't know the manufacturing costs of an organic LED panel.
Very few of us do.
Right. So if Sam the salesperson shows me just one 42-inch TV for $850, my brain completely freezes. I have no runway lights. Is that a steal or a ripoff?
And that cognitive freeze is what retailers desperately want to avoid. Presenting a product in a vacuum almost guarantees you lose the sale. It's too much work for the consumer. They'll just say, oh, let me think about it, and walk out.
Yeah, they defer the decision.
Exactly. So Sam the salesman builds the runway. He sets up 3 TVs. He puts a 36-inch one for $690 on one side. On the other side, a massive 50-inch model for $1,480.
Yeah.
And right in the middle, the 42-inch TV for $850.
And instantly, the relief I feel is palpable. The math is easy now. I look at the cheap one and think, well, I don't want the cheapest option. I look at the expensive one and think, I don't need a home theater.
Right.
So I retreat to the safety of the middle.
Right. The middle feels prudent, rational.
But the reality is, Sam set the whole thing up specifically to sell me that $850 TV. The other two were basically props. Does this mean our preferences aren't actually ours? Are they just illusions based on what's nearby?
Well, yes and no. The preference is real in the moment, but the context constructs it. And this isn't just in retail electronics. Think about restaurants. The sources talk about a restaurant consultant named Greg Rapp who found something amazing about menu engineering.
Menu engineering? Even the term sounds slightly manipulative.
Oh, it is. Rapp found that if a high-end restaurant puts a wildly expensive item on the menu, say a $41 lamb dish, overall revenue goes up. Even if nobody ever orders the lamb.
Wait, really? Even if it just sits there?
Even if it just sits there.
Yeah.
Because it's not there to be eaten. It's there to establish a ceiling. Before the lamb, maybe a $39 steak was the most expensive thing. Buying it felt irresponsible.
Like a huge splurge.
Yeah. But introduce the $41 lamb, and suddenly the psychological landscape shifts. The steak is now a compromise. The anchor has recalibrated your local scale.
For business owners listening, that is huge. Never present a product in a vacuum. Give your clients the runway lights by framing your core product between a budget option and a premium option. But if relativity is just a shortcut, what happens when someone intentionally engineers that shortcut to manipulate us? Because that leads directly to the decoy effect.
Yes. Asymmetric dominance. This is where classical economics completely breaks down. Because the trick of relativity is that our brains hate comparing to similar things.
Right, it's too much friction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Say you have option A, a digital camera, and option B, a coffee maker. Both are $300. Which is better? It's impossible to compute because the variables are so different.
It's like trying to run a foot race without a track, or comparing a runner to a swimmer.
Right. The brain hates that ambiguity.
Yeah.
So what's fascinating here is what happens when a marketer introduces a third option. Let's call it minus A. Minus A is almost the same as option A, the camera, but objectively worse.
Like maybe it has half the battery life, but costs the same?
Exactly. Now the dynamic changes. You still don't know if the camera is better than the coffee maker, but you absolutely know that option A is vastly superior to minus A.
And that local victory is so obvious it creates a halo effect. The brain just elevates option A overall. Suddenly the camera looks better than the coffee maker too.
Simply because it won a contest. Dan Ariely actually tested this with an ad he found for the Economist magazine. It's like a classic study. The magazine had 3 subscription tiers. Internet only for $59, print only for $125, and a print and internet combo also for $125.
Okay, I mean, why would anyone buy the print only for the exact same price as the combo? It looks like a typo.
It really does. It
Yeah.
offers less value for the exact same money. Structurally, it's useless. And when MIT students were given these choices, the results made sense. 84% chose the combo deal. 16% chose internet only. Nobody chose the print only.
Obviously. So standard economics would say, drop the print-only option. It's inefficient. Nobody wants it.
Right. So Ariely ran the test again with a new group, but he removed that useless decoy. Now they just had to choose between the $59 digital or the $125 combo.
And the results totally flipped, didn't they?
Completely inverted. Without the decoy, 68% chose the cheaper digital sub. Only 32% chose the combo. The combo plummeted the second they removed the option that nobody was buying anyway.
So a seemingly useless product isn't a mistake by a company. It's the actual engine driving the sale of the real product.
Yes. The print-only sub was -A. It bypassed the analytical friction. Without it, you have to debate, do I really need paper? Is it worth $66 more? But with the decoy, you don't evaluate your need for print. You just recognize that getting 2 things for the price of 1 is a mathematical triumph.
That is wild. And there's an amazing historical example of this with the Williams-Sonoma bread maker. When they launched their first home bread maker for $275, nobody bought it. Because, well, no one had any context. They didn't know if that was a good price for a bread maker.
Right, there were no runway lights.
Yeah.
You'd have to calculate the cost of store-bought bread over a year versus the labor of using the machine. It's a cognitive nightmare.
So the marketing firm comes in, and instead of lowering the price, they tell Williams-Sonoma to make a second, much bigger, much more expensive bread maker. And the second they put the huge, pricey one on the shelf, the original $275 one started flying off the shelves.
Because consumers could finally say, well, I don't know much about bread makers, but the smaller one is clearly a better deal than that giant expensive one. It's instant context.
So the practical takeaway here is, if you have a core product, don't just put it up against a totally different competitor. Introduce a slightly inferior version of your own product. You force the customer into an instant, favorable comparison.
The math of it is so elegant.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because it's easy to see how this works with money and kitchen appliances. But does this invisible math apply to human attraction, like dating?
It absolutely does, which is where things get a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We use this exact same relative hardware to evaluate people. The sources use vacations to bridge the gap here. Say you win a contest, a free week in Paris or a free week in Rome.
Great problem to have.
Right, but it's a hard choice. The Louvre versus the Colosseum, they're very different. But what if the organizer adds a third option? You could have Paris, Rome with a free breakfast, or Rome without a free breakfast.
Okay, so Rome without breakfast is the decoy. Minus Rome. Nobody would pick it when Rome with breakfast is free.
Exactly. But add in minus Rome completely changes the game. Rome with breakfast suddenly looks so objectively superior to Rome without breakfast that the cognitive ease kicks in. That halo effect elevates Rome with breakfast above Paris, too.
And this translates directly to faces. The MIT photo experiment in the book is staggering. The researcher took photos of 2 equally attractive guys, Guy A and Guy B. Then he photoshopped a decoy. He took Guy A and subtly distorted his face, thickened the nose, lowered an eyebrow, manufactured -A.
A demonstrably less attractive version.
Right. And when students were asked who they'd date from a lineup of A, B, and -A, 75% of the time they chose Guy A. When the decoy was present, they overwhelmingly preferred the pristine version of that decoy, completely ignoring the other perfectly good option.
Wait, doesn't that mean we're constantly evaluating human beings like appliances on a showroom floor? Basically, yes. Human attraction is fundamentally relative. We don't have an absolute metric for beauty in a vacuum. The slightly flawed version just dazzles the brain by providing an easy comparison.
The book actually gives us slightly Machiavellian advice based on this. If you are going to a singles bar, don't bring a friend who looks totally different from you. And definitely don't bring someone who looks like you but is way better looking, because you become their decoy.
Exactly. You are supposed to bring a friend who has your basic physical traits but is slightly less attractive. You bring your own decoy to mathematically maximize your perceived value.
That is ruthless, but it makes sense. If we're constantly running this comparative operating system, we can't just shut it off. And this brings us to the dark side. Because so far, relativity sounds like a clever tool, but the comparative nature actively destroys our happiness, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, jealousy and envy bring directly from this relativity. We are biologically incapable of assessing our wealth or success in absolute terms. The Ten Commandments even warned against this, coveting what belongs to your neighbor.
Yeah, your neighbor, not the pharaoh or a billionaire halfway across the world, because those people aren't in our localized comparative set.
Exactly. Behavioral scientists call it the salient local cohort. You compare yourself to the person right next to you. And standard economics completely missed the destructive power of this, which led to some massive policy disasters. Look at the 1993 executive pay disclosure.
This story blew my mind. So regulators were freaked out because CEO pay was out of control. It had gone from 36 times the average worker's pay to 131 times. So they forced companies to reveal CEO salaries publicly, thinking transparency would shame the boards into lowering the pay.
They assumed people are rational actors who respond to absolute metrics.
Right. But did that happen? So transparency actually fueled the fire. That completely contradicts everything we are taught about open markets.
It was pouring gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
Because financial media started publishing rankings. For the first time, every CEO in America had a detailed map of their salient local cohort. They had runway lights.
And instead of feeling shame for making $5 million, a CEO would see a rival making $6 million and feel relatively impoverished.
Yes. They'd march into the board and demand a raise to match their peers. And the boards complied. Transparency didn't suppress wages. It triggered an arms race of envy. Today, the multiplier is well over 300 times the average worker's pay.
It proved that giving perfect information to an irrational, comparison-obsessed machine just gets you hyper-irrational results. There's that great quote from H.L. Mencken in the text. He said, "A man's satisfaction with his salary depends entirely on whether he makes more than his wife's sister's husband."
Because the brother-in-law is the ultimate localized benchmark. You can't avoid him at family dinners. The emotional toll of this benchmarking is severe. The book talks about a Harvard-trained doctor who wanted to win a Nobel Prize in cancer research.
Which is an amazing absolute goal. He was perfectly happy until he went to a college reunion.
Right. He interacted with his former classmates who went to Wall Street as medical investment consultants. They had yachts and huge bonuses. In that localized context, he felt inadequate.
The friction was so bad he actually quit cancer research. He gave up his Nobel dreams to go work on Wall Street just so he wouldn't be at the bottom of the ladder at his next reunion.
It's tragic. It shows how relativity can totally warp human potential.
So how do we defend against this? To be happy and productive, the text says we have to actively control our circles.
You have to manually curate your environment. If looking at social media makes you feel poor, you have to delete those feeds. You have to break the cycle.
Like James Hong, the founder of HoTorNot.com. He made millions, bought a Porsche. But then he realized when you drive a Porsche, you stop comparing yourself to people in Hondas, and you start feeling bad when you pull up next to a Ferrari.
His baseline recalibrated upward.
Right.
So he deliberately sold the Porsche and bought a Prius. He shrank his comparative circle to protect his happiness.
Which is incredible. But envy isn't the only way relativity tricks us. It also completely warps how we perceive the value of a dollar depending on the size of the transaction. This is broad versus narrow framing.
Right. The illusion that a dollar has a fixed value in our heads, it doesn't. We compute financial value as a ratio, not an absolute number.
Tversky and Kahneman proved this with a brilliant study. Let's walk through it. Imagine you're buying a pen for $25. You're at the register and someone says, "Hey, that exact same pen is on sale for $18 at a store 15 minutes away. Will you drive across town to save $7?
Overwhelmingly, people say yes. The drive feels like a rational use of time to save the $7.
Okay, second scenario. You're buying a tailored suit for $455. Someone tells you the exact same suit is $448 at a store 15 minutes away. Do you make the drive to save $7?
In this case, almost everyone says no. They just buy the $455 suit.
So what does this all mean? $7 is $7. Why does our brain treat the exact same bill differently just because the background math changes?
Because of narrow framing. The brain doesn't look at the absolute value of $7. It looks at the local ratio. $7 off a $25 pen is a huge percentage. It feels like a massive victory. But $7 off a $455 suit is barely 1.5%. It feels like a rounding error.
And this explains why we bleed cash on upgrades, like a catering bill for $5,000. The caterer asks if you want to upgrade to lobster bisque for 200 bucks. Narrow framing says, hey, 200 is tiny compared to 5 grand. So you add it. But next week, you'll spend 10 minutes clipping coupons to save 25 cents on soup at the grocery store.
Exactly. The baseline in the store is $1, so 25 cents feels huge. It's the same logic dealerships use to sell you $3,000 leather seats for a $25,000 car. You find the paper without thinking.
Oh, but if you were just sitting on your couch and decided to buy a $3,000 leather sofa, you'd agonize over it for weeks.
Because in your living room, the 3,000 is the absolute anchor. The cognitive load is there. The takeaway here is that you have to strip away the context. Treat money as an absolute commodity to stop wasting it on these small add-ons.
If we tie all these ideas together, the runway lights, the decoys, the Wall Street envy, the pen and the suit, the soul of this chapter really is that relativity is the hidden operating system of the human brain. We are wired to compare.
We really are. We can't view the world in absolutes. But by understanding that, we can stop being manipulated by decoys. We can design vastly better choices for our customers and actively curate those comparative circles that govern our happiness.
It's an empowering realization once you get past how easily tricked we are. But if you think our reliance on comparisons is strange, wait until you hear how a completely random string of numbers, like your Social Security number, can permanently dictate how much you're willing to pay for a bottle of wine. But that is for our next deep dive.
I cannot wait for that one. The fragility of our initial valuations is just mind-blowing.
Me too. Until then, next time you feel a sudden, undeniable surge of desire for an upgrade or a new purchase, stop and ask yourself, am I choosing this because I genuinely want it or simply because someone deliberately placed a clever decoy right next to it?
What if the price you're willing to pay for your morning coffee, your car, or, even the roof over your head has absolutely nothing to do with its actual value?
Right.
What if it's secretly being dictated by just, a random number that got stuck in your brain years ago?
It is a fundamentally unsettling thought, honestly, because we walk through a marketplace, whether it's a grocery store or a real estate agency, and we just assume we're acting as independent, rational agents.
Yeah, we like to think we're smart shoppers.
Exactly. We assume the prices we're willing to pay reflect our true preferences,
Yeah.
The actual utility we expect to get. But the reality of how our brains assign value is it's far more malleable and, frankly, way more irrational than we ever care to admit.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today we have a really fascinating stack of sources in front of us. We are primarily pulling from Chapter 2 of Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational.
It's titled The Fallacy of Supply and Demand. Right.
Yep, that's the one. And we've got a pile of supplemental research, economic journals, and our own notes. Our mission here is simple. We want to be your shortcut to being well-informed.
Love that.
So we're going to extract those critical nuggets from this material so you can understand the hidden machinery driving your decisions.
And over the course of this conversation, you're about to learn how initial, often completely arbitrary numbers silently dictate our long-term valuations of, well, almost everything.
Yeah.
We'll explore why mastering this psychological quirk, which behavioral economists call anchoring, is an absolute superpower for anyone interested in business, pricing, or entrepreneurship.
Because we all carry around this underlying assumption that we have a finely tuned internal value meter, right? We believe we know what a dollar is worth to us.
Right, and that belief is the very foundation of traditional economics. If you go back to Adam Smith or pick up any Econ 101 textbook, you find this elegant, almost comforting theory.
A classic supply and demand curve.
Exactly. It assumes that supply and demand are two completely independent sovereign forces. You have producers on one side, coldly calculating the cost of materials and labor to figure out what they need to charge.
And then the consumers on the other side.
Right. Consumers looking inward, assessing their own desires and bank accounts to figure out, how much they're willing to spend.
And the theory says those two forces march toward each other and meet in the middle to create a fair market price.
But the evidence we're looking at today suggests that independence is a total illusion.
A complete myth.
What if the forces of supply and demand are actually heavily entangled? What if demand is being manufactured from the very beginning by supply?
And to understand how the supply side can effectively hijack our internal demand, the source material takes us to a rather unexpected place.
Baby geese.
Baby geese. Which sounds like a really strange detour for an economics discussion. But the underlying biology here is the key to everything.
It really is profound. So, decades ago, the naturalist Konrad Lorenz made a foundational discovery about a biological concept called imprinting.
Right.
He observed that when a baby goose breaks out of its shell, its brain is highly vulnerable. It's actively seeking immediate instruction on how to navigate the world.
He's a mom.
Exactly. So it becomes profoundly, permanently attached to the very first moving object it encounters. Now, in nature, this is almost always the mother goose. It's an evolutionary mechanism to keep the newborn safe.
But Lorenz messed with the formula.
He did. He removed the mother, and he made sure his own boots were the first moving object the goslings saw when they hatched.
And the birds they just accepted him as their mother. They followed him across the grass, totally devoted.
They followed him loyally from that moment on, straight through their adolescence. And Lorenz demonstrated two crucial principles here. First, the goslings make their most critical initial decision based on whatever happens to be in their environment at that specific vulnerable window of time.
Just whatever's there.
Right. And second, and this is the vital part, once that decision is made, the brain locks it in. It becomes imprinted.
Wow.
They do not revise that decision when a more suitable mother figure comes along later. That first impression is permanent.
So we're taking an evolutionary survival mechanism in birds and applying it to, like, how a human buys a flat screen television.
I know it sounds crazy, but the human brain is wired with similar evolutionary heuristics. We also need to conserve cognitive energy, right?
I mean, if we had to deeply calculate the intrinsic objective value of every single item we encounter every day, our brains would short circuit.
We'd never get anything done.
Yeah.
So instead, we use a psychological version of imprinting, but we imprint on prices and values.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
When we encounter a completely new product or a new category of experience, the first price we see becomes imprinted in our minds. In behavioral economics, we call this an anchor. Yeah. And from the moment that anchor is set, all of our future judgments about that product's value and the value of related products become permanently tethered to that initial, often completely arbitrary number.
The sources offer a historical example of this that, honestly, it reads like a Hollywood script.
Oh, the Salvador Sal story.
Yes. The man who became known as the Pearl King.
His career provides just the ultimate real-world demonstration of how an anchor can be manufactured from nothing.
So Asel's father was an Italian diamond dealer, right?
Oh.
Fled Europe for Cuba during World War II, started trading Swiss watches to the American army.
Right, and after the war ended, the watch business dried up. But the Japanese needed watches. They lacked hard currency, but they had pearls.
So the father teaches Salvador how to barter watches for pearls.
Exactly, setting the stage for his future empire. But the critical turning point happens in 1973.
Right, he's on his yacht in Saint-Tropez, because of course he is.
Of course. And this dashing Frenchman named Jean-Claude Bruyère comes aboard. Bruyère had recently purchased an atoll in French Polynesia, and he introduces a sail to something totally new. Black-lipped oysters that produced Tahitian black pearls.
And the context of the market at that specific time is so vital to understand. In 1973, there was absolutely zero market for Tahitian black pearls.
They were essentially worthless.
Yeah, the sources describe them as gunmetal gray, about the size of a musket ball.
Not exactly something you want to wear to a gala.
Right. And when Asel first attempted to market them, it was a complete failure. He couldn't convince anyone to buy them.
Now, if we applied traditional economics here, what should a rational businessman do when supply is high and demand is zero?
You slash the price, you throw them in a bargain bin, or you bundle them with traditional white pearls just to clear out the inventory. You race to the bottom to find the clearing price.
Right, that's what Econ 101 says to do. But Asel chose a completely different path. He understood intuitively that to drop the price would be to set a low anchor forever.
So what did he do?
He waited. He waited a full year until the oysters produced some better, rounder specimens. Then he leveraged his relationships. He took these entirely unknown pearls to his old friend, the legendary gemstone dealer Harry Winston.
Ah, smart.
Very. Winston agreed to put these unproven gray pearls in the window of his incredibly prestigious Fifth Avenue store in New York. But he didn't just put them on display.
He attached a staggering, outrageously high price tag to them.
Exactly. And Essa followed this up by running full-page advertisements in the most exclusive, glossy magazines of the era.
But he didn't photograph the black pearls alone, did he?
No, he placed them right next to diamonds, rubies, and emeralds.
That is brilliant. Just consider the mechanics of that decision. Asel recognized that the human brain had no pre-existing category for a black pearl.
It was an ambiguous item.
Exactly. So by placing it in the window of Harry Winston and photographing it next to the most precious gems on the planet, he essentially manufactured a premium anchor out of thin air.
He forced the market to imprint on the idea that these gray spheres were equal in rarity and value to a flawless diamond.
And the psychology worked flawlessly. The prices stuck.
Overnight, they went from being unsellable musket balls to highly covetable luxury items parading around Manhattan on the necks of the social elite.
He didn't just find demand. He built the runway and told demand exactly where to land.
That's a great way to put it.
But, I mean, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. A sale was dealing with high fashion, the ultra-wealthy luxury goods. People in that sphere are explicitly buying prestige and exclusivity.
Sure.
So that doesn't necessarily prove that this psychological vulnerability applies to, like, ordinary people buying ordinary items.
That is a very fair critique, and it's exactly why the researchers decided to test this phenomenon in a highly controlled environment with ordinary items.
Right, the famous MIT experiment.
Yes. Dan Ariely, along with Drazen Prelec and George Lowenstein, designed an experiment involving MBA students at MIT's Sloan School of Management.
So we're talking about smart, analytically minded individuals.
Exactly. Not people easily duped.
The setup of this experiment is fascinating because of how disconnected the variables are. So they walk into an MIT classroom and hold up a bottle of wine, a 1998 Côte d'Ivoire.
Right.
And they describe it beautifully, giving it the full sommelier treatment, right?
Yeah.
86 points from Wine Spectator, notes of red berry, mocha, black chocolate.
That's delicious.
Then they hold up another wine, a 1996 Hermitage, rated at 92 points.
And they also displayed a few other completely unrelated, mundane items, like a cordless trackball, a cordless keyboard, a design book, and a 1-pound box of Belgian chocolates.
Standard desk stuff and treats. And then they ask the students to do something that seems entirely disconnected from pricing.
This is the crazy part.
Yeah, they tell every student to write down the last 2 digits of their own social security number at the top of a page.
Following that, the researchers instructed the students to write those exact same 2 digits next to each of the items as if it were a price.
So if your social security number ends in 79, you write down $79 next to the wine, $79 next to the keyboard, and so on.
Right. Then they asked the students to simply indicate, with a yes or no, whether they would theoretically pay that specific amount for each product.
See, I'm having a hard time buying that a student would link those two things. Your social security number is a government identifier assigned to you when you were a child.
Yeah.
It has absolutely zero connection to the fair market value of a cordless keyboard in a classroom.
From a logical standpoint, you are entirely correct. The brain should immediately discard the social security number as irrelevant data.
Right.
But the researchers weren't done. After that initial yes or no question, they asked the students to write down the absolute maximum amount they would actually be willing to pay for these items in a real auction.
And this wasn't just a theoretical exercise.
No, the highest bidder was going to have to hand over real money and take the item home. There were genuine financial stakes.
And the results they recorded are, honestly, alarming.
They really are. The researchers wanted to see if the mere suggestion of that initial, totally arbitrary number, the social security digits, would serve as a neurological anchor that influenced the final real money bids.
And did it.
Entirely. The students with the highest ending social security digits, meaning numbers from 80 to 99, placed the highest bids across the board.
Yeah.
And the students with the lowest ending numbers, from 00 to 19, consistently placed the lowest bids.
Okay, hold on. I really want to challenge the depth of this effect.
Go for it.
Are you saying that if I walk into a car dealership and I see a basic entry-level Honda Civic priced at $100,000, my brain is going to anchor to that and I'll suddenly be willing to pay $80,000 for it?
Not exactly.
Because in reality, I would just laugh at the salesman and walk off the lot. Doesn't this anchor theory only work when we have absolutely zero prior knowledge?
You have hit on the exact boundary of the anchoring effect. The Honda Civic example involves a product where you already possess a deeply entrenched pre-existing anchor.
Right. I know a Civic shouldn't cost $100,000.
Exactly. You know roughly what a compact car should cost based on years of exposure to car commercials, conversations, and past purchases.
Yeah.
A new, absurdly high price won't override a well-established anchor. It will just register as a mistake or a scam. Anchoring is most powerful and almost inescapable when we are dealing with a degree of ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Right. The MIT students had a general idea of what wine or keyboards cost, but the exact value of that specific 1996 Hermitage or that specific trackball model was ambiguous enough that their brains grasped for the nearest available number to use as a starting point.
Which happened to be their social security number, just
Yep.
because it was top of mind.
Exactly.
To give some concrete context to how drastically it altered their valuations. For the cordless keyboard, the students in the bottom 20% of social security numbers bid an average of $16.
Okay.
The students in the top 20%, looking at the exact same keyboard, bid an average of $56.
That's a massive difference. Across the entire range of items, the students with high Social Security numbers bid up to 346% more than the students with low numbers.
That is insane.
The initial random number totally manipulated their willingness to part with their cash. And perhaps the most revealing part of the study, when asked afterward if they felt the Social Security numbers had influenced their bids, the students overwhelmingly said no.
They didn't even realize it was happening.
Not at all. They honestly deeply believed they were making rational, independent valuations based on the merits of the products.
It paints a picture of the human mind as this incredibly vulnerable machine.
Yeah.
I mean, the practical takeaway here for anyone listening who operates a business or sells a service is monumental.
Oh, absolutely.
The very first price or the first context you present to a potential customer is arguably the most critical strategic decision you will ever make. It lays the concrete for their mental anchor.
You set the board.
Yeah. If you want to establish your product as premium, you do not underprice it to simply gain market share or traction.
Yeah.
You have to follow the Pearl King's playbook. You position it next to premium items right out of the gate.
Because the anchor you set dictates the financial reality your customers will inhabit.
Yeah.
Which leads directly into another complex psychological mechanism the researchers identified. They termed it arbitrary coherence.
Arbitrary coherence. That sounds like an oxymoron.
It does, right. But it perfectly describes the internal logic of our irrationality. The initial price we encounter is largely arbitrary.
Like the SSN.
Exactly. It could be a manufacturer's suggested retail price, a random promotional sticker, or a social security number. But once that arbitrary price is established and accepted by our brains, it becomes our baseline.
Okay.
From that point forward, all of our future decisions regarding that product and related products become coherent. They follow a strict, logical pattern based entirely on that initial irrational starting point.
I see how that played out in the MIT auction. Even though the baseline prices were completely skewed by the random Social Security numbers, the relative pricing still made logical sense to the students.
Yes, exactly.
Everyone, regardless of whether their anchor was high or low, was willing to pay more for the 92-point Hermitage wine than the 86-point Côte du Rhône.
Right. They recognize the difference in quality.
They were being internally consistent, coherent. But their entire mathematical universe was artificially shifted up or down by a random input.
They maintained the illusion of rationality through relative comparison while being entirely blind to the irrationality of their baseline.
Which is terrifying.
It is, and it raises a critical question about the longevity of these anchors. Do we eventually shed them as we gain more experience, or are we permanently tethered to them?
I would hope we learn and adapt.
You'd hope. But the research indicates that anchors are incredibly stubborn. We do not easily hop from one anchor to another as market conditions change.
We drag them with us.
Yes. We drag our historical anchors with us across different situations, entirely different geographies,
And long periods of time.
The source material highlights a fascinating real-world study by Yuri Simonson and George Lowenstein that looks at this exact phenomenon in the housing market.
Oh, this is a great study.
Yeah, it involves people relocating between different cities.
Right. They analyzed the purchasing behavior of people moving from inexpensive real estate markets like Lubbock, Texas, to moderately priced cities like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so a jump in cost of living.
Exactly. Now, if human beings were perfectly rational economic actors, a person moving to a more expensive market would look at the local data, adjust their expectations, and increase their housing budget to secure a home comparable to the one they left behind.
They'd accept the new reality of the local supply and demand.
But they refuse to let go of the old anchor.
They just can't do it.
They experience profound cognitive dissonance. Their brain is anchored to the price per square foot they paid in Texas. When they look at houses in Pittsburgh, every price feels like a ripoff. It feels painful.
Exactly. So to avoid the psychological pain of feeling cheated, they don't increase their spending to match the new market. Instead, they stubbornly squeezed themselves and their families into smaller, less comfortable homes in Pittsburgh just to keep their overall spending coherent with their historical anchor from Lubbock.
The friction of changing the anchor is more painful than the physical friction of living in a cramped house.
Yes.
And the studies show the reverse is also true, right? People moving from wildly expensive markets like Los Angeles to Pittsburgh. They don't suddenly look around and say, wow, I can get a perfectly nice, standard-sized house here for half of what I used to pay.
Not at all.
They spend exactly the massive amount they used to spend in LA, and they end up buying palatial mansions they don't necessarily need or even want.
They sink the exact same amount of dollars into the new environment because their internal value meter is broken. It is tethered to the old, irrelevant anchor.
That's wild.
And the researchers noted that the only reliable way out of this psychological trap is to rent for a year or so in the new city.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Renting acts as a cognitive palate cleanser. It allows the brain to experience the new environment, absorb the new pricing norms, and eventually form a new anchor without making a massive, irrevocable financial commitment based on outdated data.
I'm trying to think of an analogy for this that isn't just about money. It feels a bit like someone who has spent 10 years training for marathons suddenly deciding to take up casual jogging for health.
Okay, I see where you're going.
They know they only need to run 3 miles a day to be healthy, but because their brain is anchored to the idea that a real run is 20 miles, the 3-mile jog feels worthless.
They can't enjoy the new reality because the old baseline is still screaming at them?
Exactly.
That is a very apt comparison. The baseline dictates the perceived value of the current action. And Ariely and his colleagues wanted to test exactly how stubborn these baselines, these anchors, truly are in a highly controlled laboratory setting.
They wanted to see if they could actively lure participants from an old anchor to a new one.
Right. And to do this, they needed to use something that had absolutely no pre-existing market value.
So what did they use?
Highly annoying sounds.
Because you can't look up the Blue Book value of an annoying screech.
Yeah.
There's no historical context.
Exactly. It forces the participant's brain to rely entirely on whatever anchor the researchers provide in that moment. So the researchers brought participants into a lab and exposed them to a 30-second, high-pitched, 3,000 hertz sound.
Which the book describes as similar to the piercing shriek of a smoke alarm.
It was genuinely, viscerally unpleasant to listen to.
And the manipulation of the groups here is the core of the experiment. They split the participants. Group A receives a prompt on their screen asking, hypothetically, would you be willing to repeat this experience in exchange for a payment of 10 cents?
Right.
Group B receives the exact same prompt, but the hypothetical price offered is 90 cents.
After the participants answered yes or no to that initial hypothetical question, both groups were then asked to indicate the actual rock-bottom lowest price they would demand to endure the sound again.
And again, the stakes were real.
Yes. If their bid was accepted, they had to put the headphones back on, listen to the screech, and they would be paid their bid amount.
The numbers show the anchors worked just as they did with the wine and the Social Security numbers.
Absolutely.
Group A, the ones anchored at the low 10-cent mark, demanded an average of about 33 cents to listen again. Group B, anchored at the high 90-cent mark, demanded an average of 73 cents.
The mere suggestion of the hypothetical price completely shifted how they valued their own physical discomfort and their time.
But the true purpose of the experiment was to test the persistence of memory, right?
Yes. The researchers introduced completely new, different sounds to see if the old anchors would carry over.
Okay, so what was the new sound?
First, they played a 30-second clip of white noise. And they asked both groups, hypothetically, if they would listen to this new sound for 50 cents.
So now the researchers are actively trying to reset the board. Both Group A and Group B had the exact same 50-cent focal point for this new experience.
Exactly. But when it came time to state their actual lowest price for the white noise, the two groups did not converge in the middle.
They didn't.
No. The group that was originally anchored to 10 cents for the first sound still offered much lower bids for the white noise than the group originally anchored at 90 cents.
Wow.
The shadow of that very first impression infected their valuation of an entirely separate new experience.
But didn't they push it even further?
They did. They introduced a third sound, an oscillating pitch. And this time, they attempted to totally flip the anchors.
Okay, how?
They went to the group that started at 10 cents and asked them hypothetically if they would listen to this new sound for 90 cents. They went to the group that started at 90 cents and asked if they would listen for 10 cents.
They're actively trying to yank them to the opposite end of the spectrum. I would assume at this point the participants would realize the numbers are arbitrary and just pick a price they actually felt was fair?
You'd think so.
Are we really just so stubborn that we won't adapt?
It's not about conscious stubbornness. It's about the brain's reliance on established pathways. The flip failed entirely.
Completely fair.
Completely. The participants who first encountered the 10-cent anchor continued to accept low prices, even after the massive 90-cent anchor was introduced. And the 90-cent group kept demanding much higher compensation, completely ignoring the low anchor that followed.
That is fascinating.
The underlying cognitive process works like this. The mind concludes, I don't know what this new sound is worth, but I remember that I listened to the first sound for a low amount, and I listened to the second sound for a low amount. Therefore, to remain consistent with my past self, this new sound must also be worth a low amount.
The first impression dominates absolutely everything that follows in that category.
It does.
So the practical takeaway for you as a consumer navigating the world is to practice extreme self-awareness regarding your historical anchors. If you get a significant salary bump, or if you move to a new region, recognize that your internal baseline for what a dinner out or a car or a house should cost is likely an arbitrary relic of your past, not an objective truth.
Spot on.
And for business owners, this concept highlights a terrifying reality. You aren't just competing against the physical shop across the street. You are actively at war with the stubborn, deeply entrenched historical memory of your customers.
And this creates a monumental hurdle for innovation and premium product launches.
Because if the human brain is so fiercely protective of its historical anchors, how does a drastically more expensive premium product ever successfully break into an established commoditized market?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
I mean, how did we go from an era where everyone happily paid 50 cents for a cup of burnt diner coffee served in a styrofoam cup to an era where millions of people willingly drop $5 on a latte every single morning?
Right.
If our brains were anchored to cheap coffee, how was that anchor ever dislodged?
The answer lies in the brilliant execution of the Starbucks strategy. To convince consumers to accept a vastly different, higher price point, you cannot simply offer a slightly improved version of the same product.
The brain is too smart for that.
Exactly. If Howard Schultz, the visionary behind Starbucks, had just opened a standard-looking coffee shop with linoleum floors and fluorescent lights and tried to charge 3 times as much because he used better beans, the venture would have collapsed immediately.
Because the environment would have triggered the Dunkin' Donuts or the local diner anchor. A consumer would walk in, look around, see a $3 price tag, instantly compare it to their 50-cent memory, feel the psychological pain of being ripped off, and walk right back out.
Schultz understood that to bypass the old anchor, he had to change the environment and the sensory experience so drastically that the customer's brain did not recognize it as the same category of experience.
He had to make it incomparable.
He had to make Starbucks fundamentally incomparable to diner coffee.
He transformed it into a theatrical production of a continental European coffeehouse. The stores were designed to overwhelm the senses.
They smelled different, they looked different.
Right. They were heavily fragranced with the intense smell of freshly roasted beans, banishing any scent of grease or fried food. The visual cues were completely different. French presses, espresso machines that looked like scientific equipment.
And the food wasn't glazed donuts. It was upscale, unfamiliar items like almond croissants and biscotti.
Crucially, he even altered the vocabulary of the transaction to short-circuit the brain's default patterns.
This is key.
You could not walk in and simply order a small, medium, or large coffee. You were required to learn a new language. You ordered a short, tall, grande, or venti.
You didn't just ask for a coffee, you requested a cafe americano, a macchiato, or a frappuccino.
Every single sensory detail, every word spoken, was engineered to feel distinctly different from the traditional coffee experience.
And because the entire interaction felt totally alien, the consumer's brain didn't pull up the 50-cent diner anchor. It categorized this as a novel experience.
Which made the consumer perfectly open to accepting the $4.15 price tag as the brand new anchor for this specific category.
Exactly.
But I have to push back a bit on the implications here. Are we saying the actual quality of the coffee didn't matter at all? Was it purely just smoke, mirrors, and Italian vocabulary that built the empire?
The quality of the coffee absolutely mattered for long-term retention. If the coffee was terrible, the customer wouldn't return regardless of the atmosphere.
Right.
However, the quality of the coffee is not what allowed Starbucks to break the initial price barrier. The environment and the framing disabled the old anchor, giving the high-quality product a chance to be experienced without the immediate friction of sticker shock.
That makes sense.
And once that new anchor is accepted, an incredibly powerful behavioral loop begins. It's known as self-herding.
Okay, let's differentiate that. Because we're all familiar with standard social herding, right? You walk down the street, you see a long line of people queued up outside a bakery, and your brain uses a heuristic. If all those people are willing to wait, the food must be incredible.
Exactly. So you join the line, you outsource your decision-making to the crowd.
But self-herding is different.
Social herding is following others. Self-herding is a phenomenon where you line up behind your own previous behavior.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the timeline. You try Starbucks once, perhaps out of curiosity or because a friend brought you. You pay the higher price, you enjoy the coffee, and you leave.
Okay.
The next week, you are walking past that same Starbucks. You do not stand on the sidewalk and perform a complex, rational cost-benefit analysis. You do not consciously compare the flavor profile of the macchiato to the price differential at the local diner.
The brain takes a shortcut to save energy.
Oh,
You think, I went to Starbucks last week, I paid the premium, I enjoyed it. Therefore, I am the kind of person who goes to Starbucks and pays these prices. This is a validated good decision for me.
you effectively become the second person in line, standing right behind the ghost of your past self.
That's a great image.
As the weeks and months pass, you repeat the action. You herd yourself into a deeply ingrained habit. Eventually, you aren't just buying the smallest size, you are self-herding your way up the menu to the venti, adding extra espresso shots.
Without ever stopping to question the underlying financial logic of how you escalated into this price bracket in the first place.
You simply operate on the underlying assumption that your past self made a rational, calculated choice, so you blindly trust it and follow it.
This reveals something profound about product differentiation. The practical takeaway here is that if you were trying to charge a premium in a market that is already highly commoditized, competing on minor feature upgrades is a losing battle.
You cannot just be 10% better.
You must create a totally new category or a radically different environment. You have to differentiate the packaging, the naming conventions, the delivery mechanism.
You must provide the customer's brain with the necessary permission to abandon the old anchor and form a brand new one. It requires managing the entire context of the transaction, not just the product itself.
This makes me think of a concept I've seen in the software industry.
Oh, the pricing tiers.
Yeah. A company will release an enterprise tier of their software for, say, $10,000 a month. They know that 99% of their user base is small businesses who will never ever buy the enterprise tier.
Right.
But by placing that massive number at the top of the pricing page, it instantly changes the context. Suddenly, the pro tier for $200 a month looks like a completely reasonable, almost thrifty necessity.
Whereas before, $200 might have seemed steep.
Exactly. The $10,000 tier isn't meant to be sold. It's meant to be an anchor.
That is a textbook application of the principle. They are manipulating the relative coherence of the lower tiers by artificially inflating the ceiling.
So we have established how anchors dictate our monetary valuations and how clever framing can manipulate those anchors. But the source material takes this a step further into territory that feels almost philosophical.
The framing effect.
Yeah. Can an anchor actually change how we physically or psychologically experience something? Can an anchor make an inherently painful experience feel pleasurable, or vice versa?
The research dives deep into this. It demonstrates that anchors do not merely dictate monetary value, they dictate the actual subjective emotional reality of an event.
Which is wild.
It really is. Whether we view a situation as a benefit or a cost, a pain or a pleasure, is almost entirely dependent on how the initial anchor frames the experience before it happens. Ariely refers to this psychological phenomenon as the Tom Sawyer effect.
Referencing the famous scene from Mark Twain's novel.
Exactly.
So Tom Sawyer gets in trouble and is punished. He's forced to spend a beautiful Saturday morning whitewashing his Aunt Polly's massive fence.
It's backbreaking work.
And he knows all the other boys are going to walk by and ruthlessly make fun of him for being stuck doing chores.
But Tom is an intuitive master of psychological framing.
Right. When his friend Ben comes walking by, Tom doesn't act miserable. He doesn't complain. He acts as though painting the fence is an incredible, rare, artistic privilege.
He frames the manual labor not as a chore to be endured, but as an exclusive opportunity to be relished.
He tells Ben, does a boy get a chance to whitewash a fence every day?
And his framing is so effective, so compelling, that Ben eventually begs to help. and actually pays Tom his apple just for the privilege of taking over the paintbrush.
Tom completely transformed a negative, painful experience into a positive, highly sought-after commodity purely through the initial anger he set in Ben's mind.
Mark Twain captured the essence of this behavioral economics principle decades before the field even existed. He wrote, "Work consists of whatever a body is obliged to do. Play consists of whatever a body is not obliged to do."
Such a great quote.
Ariely wanted to test if he could replicate this exact literary effect in a modern university setting. He wanted to see if he could arbitrarily take an ambiguous experience and make it feel pleasurable or painful based solely on the starting anchor.
And the ambiguous experience he selected was, hilariously, listening to him read poetry.
Right. He announced to his students that he would be hosting a poetry reading, reciting selections from Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass.
But he carefully split the students into two separate groups.
He approached the first half and asked them a hypothetical question. Would you be willing to pay me $10 to listen to me recite poetry for 10 minutes?
By doing that, he immediately sets the anchor that this reading is a valuable, premium service, like a concert or a lecture, that requires financial compensation to access.
Right. He then approached the second half of the students and asked them the exact inverse. Hypothetically, would you be willing to listen to me recite poetry for 10 minutes if I paid you $10?
Which completely flips the neurological script. It frames the exact same poetry reading as a tedious, painful chore like participating in a medical trial or filling out surveys that requires financial compensation just to endure.
After setting these vastly different hypothetical anchors, he brought the groups together and announced that he was going to hold an actual auction for tickets to the reading.
He offered a short reading, a medium reading, and a long reading.
And the resulting bids prove that the Tom Sawyer effect is a verifiable psychological reality.
What happened?
The students who were initially anchored to the idea of paying actually bid their own money for the privilege to attend. They offered about $1 for the short reading, $2 for the medium, and $3 for the long one.
They treated it like a cultural event. They perceived value in the experience.
Exactly. But the reaction of the second group was entirely the opposite. The students who were anchored to the idea of being paid demanded payment to attend. When the auction started, they wanted $1.30 to endure the short reading, and they demanded almost $5 to sit through the long one.
This blows my mind. Because neither group had any idea if Ariely was a brilliant, captivating poetry reader or a terrible, boring one.
They had no clue.
The physical experience itself was a total blank slate. But whatever their very first mental decision was, whether they evaluated it as paying or being paid, they used that single data point as the bedrock foundation for all their subsequent decisions.
The objective reality of the experience was erased and replaced entirely by the arbitrary anchor. From a neurological standpoint, the first group was primed to anticipate a reward, releasing dopamine, while the second group was primed to anticipate a cost or a burden.
The practical takeaway here is that positioning is everything. In business, in corporate leadership, in parenting, how you introduce a task completely rewires how the person will emotionally experience the execution of that task.
Absolutely.
If management introduces a new corporate software system by saying, we know this is annoying, but it's a compliance requirement, the employees will inevitably experience it as a painful chore.
But if it's framed as an exclusive premium tool that only the top-tier teams get early access to, they will experience learning it as a privilege.
I am trying to wrap my head around a real-world equivalent of this. It's like the fitness industry.
Oh, how so?
If you took someone, drove them to a muddy field, and forced them to crawl under barbed wire and plunge into ice water for 3 hours, they would call the police.
It would be an agonizing, traumatic experience.
Exactly. But if you take that exact same physical ordeal, call it a Spartan race, and charge them $150 to participate, suddenly it is framed as a profound test of character and personal achievement.
They will proudly post photos of their bruises.
The physical agony is identical down to the cellular level.
Yeah.
But the anchor completely rewrites the psychological reality.
It really does.
But this brings up a really heavy question. If an experience's value and our actual emotional reaction to it is entirely dictated by how it's framed initially, does objective value even exist?
That is the big question.
Or are we just walking, talking rationalization machines, constantly making up logical stories to justify the random numbers and frames we encountered 5 minutes ago?
That is the profound, unsettling question at the heart of behavioral economics. We rely so heavily on these external cues to construct our internal reality because true objective calculation is often beyond our immediate cognitive capacity.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the grand synthesis of everything we have discussed today. All of these separate threads, the Tahitian pearls, the social security numbers, the housing markets, the annoying sounds, the Walt Whitman poetry, they all point to a massive structural flaw in the foundation of how we view the world.
The ultimate holy grail of our economic system is the law of supply and demand. It's the belief that consumer demand, our intrinsic willingness to pay, and market supply, the producers need to charge, are these two majestic, fiercely independent forces that battle it out in the free market to discover a perfectly fair, rational price.
But the evidence we have unpacked today strongly suggests that supply and demand are not independent forces at all. In fact, supply consistently dictates demand.
It's a one-way street.
Pretty much. Through manufacturer-suggested retail prices, through aggressive marketing campaigns, through the careful curation of environments like Starbucks, and through strategic framing, the supply side actively implants the anchors in our brains.
The producers determine what we think we're willing to pay, and then we oblige them.
That shatters the illusion of the rational consumer. We like to walk through the world believing we are independently calculating the utility and the joy of every coffee, every car, every house we buy.
But we aren't. We are simply reacting to memory. We are pawns to the prices we saw last week. We aren't maximizing our utility. We are just desperately trying to stay coherent with arbitrary past decisions.
And Ariely proposes a brilliant thought experiment to perfectly illustrate the macroeconomic implications of this.
What's the experiment?
Imagine if the government announced tomorrow that they were imposing a massive new tax that instantly doubled the price of gasoline.
Okay.
According to traditional economic theory, that huge spike in price should drastically cut consumer demand. People would immediately start driving less, buying hybrid vehicles, and organizing carpools to avoid the financial pain.
Which feels intuitively correct. If gas suddenly jumps from $3 a gallon to $6 a gallon, I am absolutely canceling my weekend road trip.
But Ariely adds a crucial twist to the scenario. What if that new gas tax was mysteriously accompanied by a nationwide bout of amnesia?
Oh.
What if every single person woke up tomorrow with the gas price doubled to $6, but absolutely no memory of what gas used to cost yesterday?
Oh, that changes the entire equation.
If we possess no memory of the past prices, would our demand drop? Ariely argues that it wouldn't drop at all. We would simply drive to the station, look at the $6 price tag, and accept it as the natural, fundamental state of the world.
Because we wouldn't know any better.
Right. Our consumption would remain largely unchanged because we wouldn't have the historical anchor triggering the psychological pain of feeling ripped off.
Because our anger and our sensitivity to price changes isn't actually a reflection of our true demand or our underlying preference. It is just a reflection of our memory.
Exactly.
We only get mad about $6 gas because we remember $3 gas.
Yeah.
If you delete the memory of the anchor, the pain evaporates entirely.
And this explains why, over the long run, even in the real world without amnesia, consumers almost always eventually adjust to higher prices. Once the initial shock wears off and the complaining stops, the new, higher price slowly becomes the new baseline anchor.
We readjust our expectations.
Just like we readjusted to the concept of a $5 morning latte or a $200 pair of running shoes. The market eventually stabilizes, not because millions of consumers performed a rational calculation of utility, but simply because we surrendered to a new arbitrary coherence.
Which raises incredibly serious questions about relying solely on completely deregulated free markets to optimize human happiness and resource distribution.
It really does.
If our brains are this easily manipulated by random anchors and clever framing, perhaps the trades and purchases we make aren't actually making us better off at all. It suggests that because we are so predictably irrational, the free market is relying on a baseline of consumer rationality that simply does not exist in nature.
It forces us to entirely reconsider the architecture of how we navigate our choices, both as buyers and as sellers.
Today, we have taken a deep look at how a random number can literally dictate the value of a Tahitian pearl, the square footage of a house in Pittsburgh, or the perceived joy of a 10-minute poetry reading.
It's a lot to process.
It is. As you go about your week, try to actively spot the anchors in your own life. What habitual purchases are you making? What specific lattes are you buying? What software subscriptions are you renewing without thinking, simply because you are blindly standing in line behind your past self?
And as a final thought to leave you with, Considering everything we now know about how easily our brains lock onto arbitrary numbers, think about the digital world we are entering.
Oh, this is the scary part.
If human marketers could manipulate us this easily with printed price tags and store layouts, what happens when AI algorithms begin serving up personalized, dynamically inflated pricing anchors to each of us individually?
Based on our exact browsing history and psychological profiles right before eventually revealing the real price.
Exactly. Are we entering an era where our arbitrary coherence will be weaponized against us at scale? It is something to seriously ponder the next time you are shopping online.
The environment is changing, but our biological vulnerabilities remain exactly the same.
Always.
Join us for our next deep dive into the source material, where we will explore the magic, the danger, and the absolute irrationality behind a price tag that says exactly zero, and why the single word free can make the smartest people in the world do the most foolish things. Until next time. Have you ever, grabbed a free package of coffee beans from a promotional booth, even though you fundamentally do not drink coffee?
Oh, absolutely. Or, maybe you've stood in a ridiculously long, winding line in the sweltering heat for 45 minutes just to get a free scoop of ice cream?
Right, an ice cream that you could have literally bought at the grocery store down the street for $2.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you found yourself walking out of a massive retail store holding a cheap, scratchy promotional t-shirt that without a shadow of doubt you are never going to wear.
Straight to the back of the closet.
Right, or into a donation bin. But you took it anyway simply because it didn't cost you a dime.
We have all been there, every single one of us. And today, we're going to look at exactly why we do this.
It's a fascinating quirk of human psychology.
It really is. We are exploring a bold and honestly somewhat uncomfortable reality about human behavior. And that is this idea that zero is not just another price.
It really isn't.
It's not just the lowest number on a discount scale. Zero is an emotional hot button. It is a psychological trapdoor that, it routinely short-circuits our logic and forces us to make highly irrational decisions.
Completely irrational.
So we're going to unpack this invisible force today in our deep dive into Chapter 3, The Cost of Zero Cost. And I guarantee you, whether you are an entrepreneur looking to understand consumer behavior or just someone who wants to become a smarter shopper, understanding how this works is going to instantly change how you navigate your daily life.
It's an incredibly powerful concept. And just to ground us before we dive in, we are looking at some really fascinating behavioral economics today.
Real data.
Exactly, real data. We're talking about controlled, rigorous experiments that prove our reasoning abilities, our basic, everyday logical faculties, are predictably flawed the moment the price of an item drops to absolutely nothing.
It's wild to think about.
Yeah, this isn't just some philosophical hunch about human nature. It is verifiable, quantifiable data.
Look, to really understand why free or, zero cost is so paralyzingly powerful, we actually need to take a step back. We need to look at the concept of zero itself.
Because we take it completely for granted today.
We do. But zero has a very long, very complicated, and deeply rich mathematical history. Yet, paradoxically, it has a surprisingly poorly understood economic history.
That's right. I mean, the concept of zero didn't always exist in human consciousness. It wasn't like a rock or a tree that early humans could just point to and name.
It had to be invented.
It had to be conceptualized, yeah. And that process took millennia. It was initially utilized by the ancient Babylonians, but strictly as a placeholder.
Like just an empty space.
Exactly. It wasn't a number with its own inherent value. It was just a way to distinguish between, say, 10 and 100.
Which, if you pause and think about it, makes total sense. How do you invent the concept of nothing?
It's a weird thought experiment.
Right. If I ask you to hand me 2 apples, you can do that. If I ask you to hand me nothing, you just stand there. It's an abstract void.
Precisely. And this abstraction deeply troubled the ancient Greeks. They debated this in very lofty philosophical terms.
Oh, I bet they did.
Yeah, thinkers like Parmenides essentially argued against the existence of nothingness. They literally wondered, how could something be nothing?
Wow.
If you can talk about it, if it exists as a concept, then it is a something. The idea of the void was a paradox that puzzled and even frightened some of the greatest minds of antiquity. It felt unnatural.
So the Greeks were basically having existential crises over a math problem.
Basically, yes.
But then we trace the timeline forward to ancient India. This is where things start to really take shape, right?
Yeah, we have the ancient Indian scholar Pingala, who starts utilizing zero in conjunction with binary numbers.
Okay.
And then you have the Mayans independently developing it in the Americas, and the Romans sort of wrestling with the lack of it in their numeral system.
Roman numerals are a nightmare for math.
They really are. But the real pivotal moment, the watershed event in human history regarding zero, happened around AD 498.
Okay, what happened then?
An Indian astronomer and mathematician named Aryabhata essentially conceived of the decimal-based place value notation.
The system we use today.
Exactly. The legend goes that he was contemplating this and exclaimed a phrase in Sanskrit that translates roughly to place to place and 10 times in value.
Oh, wow.
He gave zero real power. It wasn't just a blank space anymore. It was an active participant in mathematics.
It was the spark that ignited modern math. And from there, zero went on this incredible global tour.
It really did.
It spread through the Arab world, where scholars really nurtured it and developed algebra. It eventually crossed the Iberian Peninsula into Europe, largely thanks to the Spanish Moors,
Right, and it got some tweaking from Italian mathematicians like Fibonacci.
and eventually sailed across the Atlantic to the New World.
And if we fast forward to today, zero sits alongside the digit 1 as the absolute digital bedrock of Silicon Valley.
Oh, because of binary code.
Exactly. Without the concept of zero, binary code cannot exist. Without binary code, there is no software, no internet, no smartphones, no modern computing. It's everything.
The modern world is entirely built on the back of this concept of nothingness.
Okay, so we have this magnificent, world-altering mathematical history. We totally understand how zero behaves in math, physics, and computer science.
Right.
But here is where my brain starts to hit a wall. When we apply the concept of zero to money,
It gets weird.
it gets so weird. There's essentially no formal history. It just exists as a price tag. And I have to be honest, I need to push back on the core premise here.
Go ahead.
Isn't a zero price just another point on a linear discount scale?
I see where you're going with this.
Let me explain my logic. Let's say I want to buy a television. If the TV is $1,000 and the store discounts it by $100, my brain registers a $100 savings.
Okay.
If they discount it by $200, I register a $200 savings. So if they discount an item by 100%, making it zero, isn't that just standard math?
It seems like it should be. Right. It's just the logical endpoint of a discount.
Hmm.
Why should our brains treat the jump from $1 to zero any differently than the jump from $2 to $1?
That is a brilliant question. And honestly, that is exactly what standard traditional economics would tell you.
Okay, so I'm not crazy.
No, not at all. Traditional economics assumes that humans are perfectly rational calculators. It assumes that you will weigh the utility of an item against its cost, regardless of what the price point is.
A $1 drop is a $1 drop.
Exactly. But what the behavioral data reveals, and this is where things get truly fascinating, is that zero is not just another price.
So my television analogy is flawed.
In practice, yes. When a price tag hits zero, it does not behave like a regular number in our brains.
How so?
Think of it this way. Dropping a price from $2 to $1 is like turning down the volume dial on your radio from 10 to 5. You're just adjusting the scale.
Right.
But dropping the price from $1 to zero, that's not turning the dial down. That is hitting the mute button entirely.
Oh, wow.
It changes the fundamental state of the machine. Zero acts more like a virus or a highly unstable subatomic particle. You can't just theorize about it sitting in an armchair using standard economic models.
You actually have to test it.
You have to set up an experiment, put human beings under the microscope, and observe how they actually behave.
Okay, I love the volume dial versus the mute button analogy because it implies a total systemic shift. So to prove this systemic shift, some incredibly clever researchers decided to get into the chocolate business.
Arguably the best kind of business to run an experiment with.
Right. Who doesn't love chocolate? So picture this. They set up a table in a highly trafficked public building at MIT.
Lots of smart students walking by.
Exactly. And they offer two very different kinds of chocolates for sale. On one side of the table, you have Lindt truffles. These are premium, incredibly creamy, high-quality Swiss chocolates.
Delicious.
They are individually wrapped, they feel expensive, and at the time they cost about 30 cents each if you were to buy them in bulk at a store.
Okay, so we establish a clear baseline of high quality and high value.
Exactly. Now, on the other side of the table, they have Hershey's Kisses. Now, I have nothing against a Hershey's Kiss. They are fine.
They're fine, yeah.
But they're highly ordinary, mass-produced, waxy, everyday chocolate. Nobody considers a Hershey's Kiss to be a luxury item.
It's the definition of a baseline commodity.
Right. And above this table, there is a very prominent sign that reads, 1 chocolate per customer.
Let's pause on that sign because that is the linchpin of the entire experiment.
How so?
1 chocolate per customer means you cannot just sweep your arm across the table and take a handful of both. You are forced to make a definitive, mutually exclusive choice.
You have to pick a lane.
Exactly. If you choose the lint, you give up the kiss. If you choose the kiss, you give up the lint. It forces an actual decision.
Right. It forces a cost-benefit analysis. So in stage 1 of the experiment, they set the prices like this. The premium Lindt truffle is priced at 15 cents. The ordinary Hershey's Kiss is priced at 1 cent.
Now, remember the baseline. The lint is normally a 30-cent chocolate being offered for half price.
A great deal.
The kiss is a penny. So, if standard economics holds true, what should happen?
Well, the customers at MIT acted completely rationally.
Yeah.
73% of the customers chose the premium Lindt truffle.
And the rest.
Only 27% chose the 1 cent Kiss.
Which is incredibly reassuring. It means people aren't stupid.
They can do the math.
They looked at the table, they weighed the quality of the Swiss chocolate against the 15-cent cost, and they realized that getting a premium Lindt truffle for a mere 15 cents is an absolute steal. It is a fantastic deal.
They calculated the utility perfectly. I would absolutely pay 15 cents for a Lindt truffle. It's a no-brainer.
Exactly. Traditional economics is working perfectly in stage 1. People are accurately calculating the cost-benefit ratio and maximizing their own pleasure and utility. The math checks out.
But then the researchers moved to stage 2, and this is where they test the mute button. They drop the price of both chocolates, and they drop them by the exact same amount, 1 single cent.
A completely uniform across-the-board discount of 1 penny.
Right. So the Lindt truffle goes down from 15 cents to 14 cents. Still an amazing deal.
Yeah.
But the Hershey's Kiss goes from 1 cent to 0 cents. It is now completely, utterly free.
Now, let's think about this logically before we reveal the results. The relative difference in price between the 2 chocolates is exactly the same as it was in stage 1.
What do you think? Yeah, in stage 1, 15 cents minus 1 cent is a 14-cent difference.
And in stage 2,
14 cents minus 0 cents is still a 14-cent difference.
the gap between the 2 options hasn't moved a millimeter.
It's identical.
Therefore, according to the laws of standard economics, the exact same 73 to 27% split should occur.
Because nothing essentially changed.
Right. The relative value proposition hasn't changed, so human behavior shouldn't change either.
But human behavior is messy. When they instituted that 1 cent drop to 0, that rational 73 to 27% split completely collapsed.
What?
Suddenly, 69% of the customers chose the free kiss.
Oh my God.
Only 31% chose the Lindt truffle. The preference practically inverted itself overnight.
It's an astonishing reversal. Just think about the implications of that.
It's maddening.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this brilliant, somewhat painful analogy about buying athletic socks.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you were gearing up to start running. You go to a sporting goods store specifically to buy high-quality, padded, arch-supporting athletic socks.
It's good stuff.
You know they cost a bit more, but you need them to protect your feet. You find them, they're exactly what you want.
Okay.
But right next to them on the shelf is a massive, flimsy bag of cheap, thin, unpadded tube socks. And the packaging says, buy 1 cheap bag, get a second cheap bag, entirely free.
Oh, I can feel where this is going.
You walk out of the store with 2 bags of cheap socks that are going to give you blisters, socks that you absolutely hate, just because they have the word free slapped on them.
It's so true.
You completely abandon the superior product, the high-quality socks you actually came in for and intended to buy, just to get something for nothing.
It is the exact same mechanism as the chocolate experiment. You traded massive functional utility for the temporary dopamine hit of 0 cost.
I really want to dig into the literal math of this because I think sometimes we hear these psychological studies and we just nod along without realizing how badly our brains are glitching.
We need to quantify it.
Exactly. How can we mathematically prove that taking the free Hershey's Kiss is an objectively bad decision?
We can map it out using what behavioral economists call pleasure units.
Okay, pleasure unit.
It's a way to quantify abstract value. Let's walk through the math step by step. Let's assign an arbitrary but relative number to the joy of eating these chocolates. Let's say the expected pleasure of eating a rich, creamy Lindt truffle is 50 pleasure units.
Okay, 50 units of joy for the Lindt. And for the kiss?
The kiss is ordinary, so let's give it 5 pleasure units. It's nice, but it's not a luxury experience.
Yeah.
Now we have to subtract the cost, which we will call displeasure units. Paying money causes us a slight amount of psychological pain or displeasure.
Makes perfect sense. Handing over cash hurts a little.
So in stage 1, the lint truffle costs 15 cents. That's 15 displeasure units.
Okay.
If we take the 50 pleasure units and subtract the 15 displeasure units, we get a net benefit of 35 pleasure units for choosing the lint.
Okay, holding 35 in my head. Now let's calculate the kiss in stage 1.
The kiss gives you 5 pleasure units minus 1 displeasure unit for the 1 cent cost. That leaves a net benefit of 4 pleasure units.
So 35 net benefit for the lint versus 4 net benefit for the kiss.
Right.
The lint wins by a massive margin of 31 points. It is objectively, mathematically, the superior choice.
Hence why 73% of people initially shows that the math aligns perfectly with the rational behavior.
Exactly. Now let's run the exact same math for stage 2, where both chocolates are discounted by that single penny.
Okay, let's do it.
The lint truffle is now 14 cents. So 50 pleasure units minus 14 displeasure units equals a net benefit of 36 pleasure units. It actually became an even better deal.
And the free kiss?
5 pleasure units minus 0 displeasure units equals a net benefit of 5 pleasure units.
So in stage 2, we are looking at a 36 net benefit for the lint versus a 5 net benefit for the kiss.
And 36 minus 5 is 31?
The lint still wins by the exact same margin of 31 points.
It's crazy.
The relative price difference, 14 cents, remained locked in. A purely rational consumer should have looked at stage 2, run this exact subconscious math, and said, wow, the lint is an even better deal now. I'm absolutely taking the lint.
But they didn't. They overwhelmingly swarmed the free kiss, which objectively proves that traditional economics completely fails to account for the immense logic-bending gravitational pull of free E.
It completely shatters the model.
When the price hits 0, the math goes out the window. We don't calculate anymore. We just react.
Which naturally leads us to the biggest question, why? What is happening in the human brain that causes this systemic failure in logic?
Well, before the researchers jumped to grand psychological conclusions, they actually tried to debunk their own findings.
Which is good science.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
They wondered if there was a much simpler, lazier explanation for the chocolate phenomenon. They called it the pocket change counterargument.
Right, the idea of physical friction.
Exactly. They thought, what if people aren't acting irrationally? What if people are just incredibly lazy?
I mean, it's possible.
Think about it. If you choose the 14-cent lint truffle or the 1-cent kiss in the first experiment, you have to physically stop what you are doing.
Yeah, you have to put down your bag.
You have to dig into your pocket or rummage through your purse, pull out your wallet, find the specific coins, and hand them over.
It is a minor physical hassle.
Right. But if the kiss is free, you don't have to break stride. You just reach out, grab it, and keep walking. No friction.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So the researchers thought maybe people aren't irrationally valuing free. Maybe they just value not having to dig around for a single penny.
It's a highly plausible theory, so how did they test it?
They designed a brilliant variation of the experiment to completely isolate the psychological variable from the physical variable.
Oh, smart.
They moved the entire chocolate setup to an MIT cafeteria.
A captive environment where transactions are already taking place.
Exactly. In this cafeteria, students load up their trays with sandwiches, salads, and drinks, and they pay for everything at the end of the line at the cash register.
Okay.
So the researchers put the chocolate choices right next to the register. If you wanted a chocolate, you didn't have to pull out a separate penny or 14 cents. The cashier simply tacked the price onto whatever you were already paying for your lunch.
So the physical friction is completely eradicated.
Poof, gone.
Whether you choose the lint or the free kiss, the physical action is identical. You just hand over your debit card or meal card to the cashier. There is zero difference in the physical effort required.
Exactly. So if the pocket change theory was correct, the students in the cafeteria should have reverted back to rational behavior and chosen the vastly superior lint truffle because the laziness factor was gone.
But I'm guessing that didn't happen.
Not even close. The results remained exactly the same.
Wow.
The students still overwhelmingly bypassed the incredible deal on the lint truffle and snatched up the free Hershey's Kiss. So it definitively was not about the physical hassle. It was entirely 100% psychological.
Which brings us to the true psychological reveal of this deep dive. And this is rooted deeply in evolutionary psychology and how our brains are wired to survive.
We have to talk about loss aversion.
We do. Let's unpack loss aversion.
Please.
In the natural world and in the economic world, almost every transaction or decision has an upside and a downside. There is a risk involved.
Okay.
When we pay for something, even if it's just a single solitary penny, we are engaging in a trade. And anytime we trade resources, our primitive brain registers a potential threat.
Like, oh no, I'm losing something.
Exactly. We risk making a poor decision. We risk experiencing a loss. Our evolutionary wiring is heavily biased toward protecting our resources because, historically, losing resources meant starving.
So parting with a penny triggers a tiny subconscious alarm bell that says, warning, you are giving up a resource.
That's exactly it. But when something is free,
that alarm bell is completely dismantled.
yes, we forget the downside entirely because there is no visible possibility of financial loss. We feel invincible.
Right.
There is no risk. And because our brains love a risk-free scenario, it artificially inflates the perceived value of the free item to astronomical heights.
It's like walking through a minefield.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Normally, you are stepping very carefully, calculating every move, weighing the cost and benefit of stepping on this patch of grass versus that rock.
Right, trying not to explode.
But the moment someone slaps a free e-sign on the path, your brain stops looking for mines entirely. You just run blindly forward.
That's a fantastic way to visualize it. By trying to protect ourselves from a tiny, almost microscopic financial loss, like a single cent, we end up completely blinding ourselves to the actual massive value we are losing out on.
We literally gave up a premium, delicious Swiss chocolate at an absolute bargain price just to avoid the phantom psychological pain of parting with a penny.
Yes, and this is the official phenomenon that the researchers coined, the zero price effect.
The zero price effect.
It is a fundamental cognitive glitch, and once you understand it, you start seeing it weaponized everywhere.
Right, because this doesn't just stop at MIT students and chocolate. If this is an evolutionary glitch, it means major corporations can exploit it.
And they absolutely do. Think about consumer electronics.
Oh.
Have you ever gone to an electronics store to buy a new television or a DVD player? Often you'll see a massive display where the manufacturer is offering, say, 7 free high-definition movies if you buy their specific new player.
Yeah, you see those bundles all the time.
What is the marketing strategy there? They are using the zero price effect as a smokescreen.
A smokescreen for what?
By flashing the word free E, they are intentionally triggering that psychological invincibility we just talked about. They want to mask the fact that the actual technology they are selling might be inherently flawed, or worse, that the format might soon be completely obsolete.
Right, like back in the day with Betamax versus VHS.
Yeah.
Or HD DVD versus Blu-ray.
Exactly. You might be staring at a $600 machine that is going to be a useless brick in 12 months.
Oh, man.
A rational brain would investigate the specs, read the reviews, and carefully consider the $600 risk.
But the primitive brain sees 7 free movies, and the threat detection system shuts down.
The free items blind us to the catastrophic risk of the larger purchase. The excitement of the free DVDs entirely short-circuits our ability to rationally evaluate the machine.
That is wild, and it perfectly demonstrates how the zero price effect scales up. It goes from a tiny penny chocolate to a $600 corporate trap.
It really does.
And these corporate traps, these situations where we abandon logic for a freebie, are what behavioral economists call free exchanges.
Let's explore some more of these free exchanges, because it proves that this isn't just a quirk of adult consumerism. This is hardwired into us from a very young age.
Right. Is this a learned behavior because we live in a hyper-capitalist society, or are we born with this glitch?
To figure that out, one of the researchers ran an experiment using the purest, most uncapitalist test subjects they could find.
Trick-or-treaters on Halloween.
It's a brilliant setting because kids don't have credit cards or mortgages. They operate purely on a candy-based economy.
Exactly. So the researcher ran this experiment at his own house with the kids coming to his door. He specifically mentions kids named Joey and Zoe.
Let's look at Zoe.
So Zoe knocks on the door, holding her bag of Halloween candy.
Yeah.
The researcher offers Zoe a very clear, very rational deal.
Okay, what's the deal?
He says, Zoe, you can trade me one of the Hershey's Kisses from your bag, and in exchange, I will give you this massive, large Snickers bar.
Wow.
Or, he offers a second option, I will give you this small, fun-sized Snickers bar for free, and you don't have to trade me anything.
Now, let's break down the candy math here.
Please do.
Giving up one small Hershey's Kiss, which is maybe 1/4 of an ounce of chocolate, in order to acquire a large, full-size 2-ounce Snickers bar is a vastly superior deal.
Right, it's huge.
On an ounce-for-ounce basis, the return on investment is staggering. It is the candy equivalent of trading a dime for a $10 bill.
It is a total no-brainer. If a stockbroker offered you that trade, you'd take it every day of the week.
Absolutely.
But what did Zoe do? What did 70% of the kids in this experiment do?
They took the free one, didn't they?
They took the mathematically inferior, but free small Snickers bar. They couldn't bear the thought of losing one of their Hershey's Kisses, even if it meant gaining a massive Snickers.
It proves that the glitch is innate. Even children who have no concept of traditional finance are completely blinded by the zero price effect.
And if children are falling for it, you better believe massive global conglomerates are using it to drive billions of dollars in revenue.
Oh, without a doubt.
Which brings us to the Amazon shipping story. This is probably my favorite anecdote because it exposes how absurd we are on a global scale.
It's a perfect case study in corporate strategy meeting human psychology.
So early on, Amazon wanted to increase their average order value. They wanted people to buy more stuff.
Right, naturally.
So they instituted a new shipping policy. They said, if you order one book for, say, $16.95, you have to pay $3.90 for shipping.
Okay, pretty standard.
But if you add a second book to your cart and push your total order over a certain threshold, let's say $31.90, your shipping becomes completely free.
Now, let's pause and analyze the trap. They are asking you to spend an additional $15 on a second book you probably didn't even want in the first place, just to save roughly $4 in shipping.
Logically, it's a terrible trade. You are spending $15 to save $4.
Makes no sense.
But predictably, sales skyrocketed globally. People were frantically searching the site, throwing random books into their carts, buying things they absolutely did not need, just to see that magical word free next to the shipping line.
The zero price effect was working flawlessly.
Flawlessly. Except in one specific country.
Oh, really? Which one?
France. There was one glaring exception on Amazon's global revenue map. Sales skyrocketed everywhere in the world, except in France. In France, the promotion fell completely flat.
That's bizarre.
Right. And the executives at Amazon headquarters in Seattle were baffled. They were looking at the data, scratching their heads, wondering, what is going on in France? Are the French somehow immune to this? Are French consumers just inherently more rational and mathematically disciplined than Americans and the British?
It was a mystery until they dug into how the French division actually executed the promotion.
Right. It turned out the French division of Amazon had slightly altered the promotion to comply with some local pricing conventions.
What did they do?
Instead of offering free shipping when you bought the second book, they priced the shipping at 1 franc, which at the time was the equivalent of about 20 cents in U.S. currency.
Okay, let's look at the logic of a 20-cent shipping fee. Logically, rationally, paying 20 cents to have a box of heavy books shipped directly to your front door is a massive, unbelievable bargain.
It's essentially nothing.
You couldn't drive your car to the bookstore for 20 cents of gas?
It is an incredible deal, but here is the absolute crux of the issue. 20 cents is a great deal, but it is not zero.
Ah, there it is.
Because the price tag wasn't zero, it failed to trigger the zero price effect. The mute button was never pressed.
Wow.
The French consumers were still operating with their rational cost-benefit brains turned on. They looked at the deal and thought, well, 20 cents is cheap, but do I really want to spend $15 on a second book just to save $3.75 on shipping?
No, that's stupid. I'll just buy the one book I actually want.
Exactly. The tiny 20-cent friction point kept their logical brains engaged.
So what did Amazon do?
The moment they realized this, they called the French division and said, change the shipping from 1 franc to 0. Make it free.
And let me guess.
The moment they made it free, French sales skyrocketed on the exact same trajectory as the rest of the world.
That is incredible.
The French weren't more rational, they just hadn't been exposed to the virus of zero.
It is a stunning real-world validation of the MIT chocolate experiment. The difference between 20 cents and 0 is psychologically astronomical. 20 cents keeps you a rational actor. 0 turns you into an irrational consumption machine.
We abandon a $30 cart of goods we actually want just to avoid a measly 20-cent fee. It's embarrassing.
It really is.
Another massive corporate example that illustrates this buffet mentality is the story of America Online, AOL.
For those who remember the early days of dial-up internet, this is a very visceral memory.
Absolutely. All those CD-ROMs in the mail.
Yes.
In the early days, AOL charged users by the hour. You bought a certain block of hours, and if you went over, you paid by the minute.
It kept people very disciplined. You logged on, checked your email, and logged off.
But eventually, to combat competition, AOL completely changed their business model. They switched from a pay-per-hour model to a flat rate of $19.95 per month for unlimited access.
And what happened the moment they made those extra hours free?
The results were utterly catastrophic for their infrastructure. Because every hour beyond the initial perceived value felt free, demand surged, literally overnight.
People's behavior changed fundamentally.
They went from having about 140,000 simultaneous users at peak times to 236,000 users logging in almost instantly.
That's a massive jump.
Online time doubled. People were logging on and simply refusing to log off. They would leave their connections open while they went to work or went to sleep, just because it didn't cost them anything extra.
They were acting like starving people on an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Yes, stuffing themselves until they were sick, just because the marginal cost was zero. And it literally crashed the entire AOL system. The servers melted down under the weight of the zero price effect.
It shows that when the price is zero, we don't consume based on our actual needs. We consume simply because the barrier to consumption is gone.
And this irrationality doesn't just affect small purchases or digital hours. It affects massive, life-altering financial decisions.
Like what?
Well, there is a deeply personal anecdote in the research about a guy looking for a new car.
A car is arguably the second largest purchase most people make, behind a house. You would think logic would reign supreme here.
You would hope. So this guy, let's call him the researcher, knows he needs a responsible, practical vehicle. He has a family.
Okay.
He sets out to buy a Honda minivan. It's safe, it's reliable, it gets good gas mileage, and it fits his budget perfectly. It is the logical choice.
Sounds smart.
But during his shopping process, he somehow finds himself wandering into an Audi dealership, and he becomes irrationally, magnetically lured to a sporty red Audi.
Uh-oh.
A car that is significantly more expensive, less practical for a family, and much more expensive to insure.
So why is he suddenly considering abandoning his perfectly rational minivan plan for a luxury sports car?
Because the Audi dealership was running a promotion offering free e-oil changes for 3 years.
Wait, really? Let's do the math on that. How much does an oil change cost? Maybe $50.
Yeah, around that.
And you need one every, what, 6 months?
Right. So we were talking about roughly $300 worth of free oil changes spread out over 3 years.
The idea that a trivial $300 perk could sway a highly educated, rational person to abandon a practical minivan and purchase a luxury vehicle that costs tens of thousands of dollars more is staggering.
It's completely absurd.
It completely defies logic.
But the word free E clouded his judgment entirely. He wasn't evaluating the price of the car anymore. His brain was solely focused on the dopamine hit of winning those free oil changes.
Wow.
It highlights how zero is not just a discount. It is a completely different, highly dangerous marketplace.
And we fall into these traps in our daily lives constantly.
Oh, absolutely. Let me throw a real-world scenario at you, something most listeners have probably dealt with.
Okay, lay it on me.
Think about opening a bank account. You walk into a bank, and they offer you 2 options. Option A is a free checking account.
Sounds good so far.
It has absolutely no monthly fees, but it comes with 0 benefits. You pay for your own checks, you pay a $3 fee every time you use an out-of-network ATM, and there's no online bill pay.
Okay, the baseline free option.
Now, option B is a premium account. It costs $5 a month, but for that $5, you get a book of free checks every year, free cashier's checks, free online bill pay, and most importantly, they waive all ATM fees globally.
Okay, so let's actually sit down and do the math.
Right. How many times do you use an out-of-network ATM in a month? If you use it twice, you've already spent $6 in fees.
Which is more than the $5 monthly fee of the premium account.
Exactly. If you choose the free account, you will almost certainly end up spending significantly more money in the long run on hidden fees and surcharges.
But what do most people choose?
They choose the free account.
100%.
We are so utterly terrified of committing to that visible, recurring $5 fee that we willfully ignore the $20 in hidden costs we incur every single month by choosing the free option.
It's that loss aversion again.
Yes. As the research concludes on this exact point, the difference between 2 cents and 1 cent is negligible in our brains, but the difference between 1 cent and 0 is monumental. It completely shatters the paradigm of how we value the transaction.
And this leads us to perhaps the most insidious part of the zero price effect.
What's that?
Well, the hidden costs of free aren't just about losing money on ATM fees or buying a second book you don't want. The cost often extracts a toll on things far more valuable than currency.
Right.
Hmm.
We are pivoting now to how the concept of zero applies to our time, to our physical health, and surprisingly, how we might actually be able to flip this glitch and weaponize it for the greater good of society.
What's deeply fascinating here is how behavioral economists broaden the definition of a cost. We tend to only think of costs in terms of dollars and cents, but time spent on a free activity is a massive, irreplaceable cost. We just rarely account for it in our mental ledgers.
This is so true. Have you ever seen those promotions where a famous ice cream shop like Ben & Jerry's offers a free cone day?
Yes, the lines usually wrap around the block.
Exactly. People will stand in a suffocatingly hot line on a crowded sidewalk for 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, just to get a single free scoop of ice cream.
It's crazy.
Now, let's apply the economic lens to this. How much does a scoop of Ben & Jerry's cost on a normal Tuesday? Maybe $3 or $4?
Probably around there, yes.
So you are trading an hour of your finite life, an hour you could spend working, reading, relaxing, and spending time with your kids, for a return of $4.
Which is terrible.
If you value your time at even minimum wage, say $15 an hour, waiting an hour for a $4 ice cream cone is an appallingly bad economic decision. You are operating at a massive loss.
But because our physical wallets aren't lighter, we feel like we won.
We feel victorious. We walk away with our melting free ice cream thinking we beat the system, when in reality, the system just stole an hour of our lives.
It's so sad when you frame it like that.
The same thing happens on free entrance days at museums or zoos. Have you ever gone to a museum on a free Tuesday?
It is usually a nightmare.
It is shoulder to shoulder screaming kids. You can't even see the exhibits. It takes 20 minutes to use the restroom. You suffer through a completely awful, degraded experience just because the monetary price is zero.
Yeah, that's a miserable experience.
You would have had a profoundly better experience if you just paid the $20 admission fee on a normal Thursday. But the lure of zero overrides our desire for a quality experience. We trade our valuable time, which we can never ever get back, for experience that is objectively terrible.
And this zero-cost illusion extends even further into how we perceive our physical health and nutrition. The concept of zero is incredibly dangerous when applied to food.
This is the halo effect, right?
Exactly. When you walk down the grocery store aisle and a food label screams 0 calories or 0 trans fats, it triggers the exact same irrational, invincible response in our brain as a 0-cent price tag.
It just shuts down our logic.
Right. It disarms our nutritional threat detection system.
Exactly. The researchers point out how this works in a fast food setting. Imagine you were ordering lunch. You decide to order a Diet Coke or a Pepsi Max instead of a regular soda. The label says 0 calories.
Okay.
Because you chose the 0-calorie drink,
Yeah.
you suddenly feel incredibly virtuous. You feel like you've made this incredibly healthy, responsible choice.
You've acquired nutritional freebies.
Yes. And because you feel so protected by that zero,
Yeah.
your brain irrationally justifies a much worse decision to balance it out.
So what do you do?
You think, well, I'm drinking a 0-calorie soda, so I can definitely afford to order this massive, greasy plate of double cheese fries.
Oh.
The zero acts as a halo that blinds us to the overall nutritional cost of the entire meal. We end up consuming way more calories overall than if we had just ordered a regular sandwich and a regular soda.
It creates a false sense of security that leads to overindulgence.
It's the buffet mentality applying to our waistlines.
It really is.
But here is where we get to the most optimistic and perhaps the most important part of this entire deep dive.
Because it's not all doom and gloom.
No, it's not. If we know definitively that human beings are fundamentally wired like this, if we know we all possess this highly exploitable cognitive glitch regarding the word free E, we don't just have to sit back and let marketers use it to drain our wallets and steal our time.
We can actually use it.
We can actually weaponize our own irrationality.
We can flip the script.
Exactly. Policy strategists, governments, and global health organizations can use the zero price effect to literally save lives and improve society.
Let's talk about how that works in healthcare, because this is where it gets really powerful.
So we know that early disease detection is the key to surviving major illnesses. and reducing the massive financial burden on the healthcare system.
Absolutely.
Getting people to undergo preventative screenings is incredibly difficult. People are scared, they are busy, and these procedures cost money. So what is the traditional economic approach to encouraging people to get, say, a colonoscopy or a mammogram or a routine cholesterol check?
Well, the traditional approach is to lower the barrier to entry by reducing the cost. So a health insurance company or a government program might lower the copay for a mammogram from $50 to $10.
Right, and $10 is a great deal for a life-saving medical procedure. It's a massive discount.
But
But remember Amazon France? What happened when they lowered the shipping cost to 20 cents?
it failed to trigger the massive behavioral shift. It was a good deal, but it wasn't zero.
Exactly. Lowering a medical copay to $10 still requires the patient to pull out their wallet. It still triggers that tiny evolutionary alarm bell of loss.
The friction is still there.
The physical friction and the psychological friction are still present. People will still put it off. They will still say, I'll pay the $10 next month.
So what is the solution?
Make them completely 100% free.
No copay, no hidden fees, absolutely zero out-of-pocket cost at the point of service.
Yes, the moment you make a life-saving screening free, you trigger the zero price effect. You eliminate the psychological friction.
The patient's brain shifts entirely.
They go from viewing the procedure as a cost or hassle to viewing it as a free benefit they would be foolish to pass up.
Right.
The researchers forcefully suggest that making highly beneficial behaviors completely free is an unplayed ace in the hand of policy strategists everywhere.
It removes the barrier to action entirely.
And the exact same logic applies to environmental policy. Let's say a city or a state government really wants to reduce carbon emissions, and they want to incentivize citizens to ditch their gas-guzzling trucks and drive electric cars.
Standard policy right now is to offer a tax rebate, or maybe reduce the annual registration fee for EVs. So instead of paying $200 to register your car, you pay $50.
Which, again, is the 20-cent shipping trap. It's a nice perk, but $50 still feels like a penalty.
It still hurts.
If you want to drive a massive systemic shift in human behavior, you shouldn't just reduce the registration fee. You need to eliminate it entirely. You need to make electric vehicle registration free forever.
Or free parking.
Yes, you need to make parking at city meters for electric vehicles free.
That single word has more power to drive human behavior toward the greater good than almost any other complex economic incentive you could design.
It is a profoundly powerful, highly counterintuitive tool. Now, I know what the skeptics are thinking.
What's that?
In times of budget cutbacks and economic strain, making expensive medical procedures or municipal services free seems impossible. It sounds like financial ruin for the state or the hospital.
But that is a short-term standard economics view of the problem.
Exactly. When you zoom out and factor in the long-term societal savings, the millions of dollars saved by preventing late-stage cancer treatments because you caught a tumor early, or the billions saved in environmental cleanup and healthcare costs by drastically reducing urban carbon emissions.
It completely balances out.
The initial cost of subsidizing that free mammogram or that free EV registration is an incredibly smart, high-return investment.
It pays for itself 100 times over by preventing the much larger downstream costs.
So as we bring this all together, let's look at the massive journey we've taken today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We've explored the philosophical birth of zero with the ancient Greeks and Indians. We've gone to MIT and watched perfectly rational students lose their minds over a penny drop on a Hershey's Kiss.
Yep.
We've unpacked the evolutionary psychology of loss aversion and why our brains treat paying a single cent like a mortal threat.
We've seen how Amazon and AOL exploited this glitch to rewrite the rules of global commerce.
And how the French accidentally proved the entire theory with a 20-cent shipping fee.
That was a great story.
We've looked at the hidden, insidious costs to our time in those awful Ben & Jerry's lines, and the damage to our health when we fall for the zero-calorie halo effect. And finally, we've seen the beacon of hope. How we can flip this cognitive glitch to encourage life-saving medical screenings and promote a greener planet.
When you synthesize all of this data, all these varied examples across different aspects of human life, one core, undeniable truth emerges.
And that truth, the absolute core insight of today's deep dive, is this. Free, is actually the most expensive price you can possibly pay.
It sounds like an oxymoron, but it is reality.
Whether we are giving up a far better quality Swiss chocolate, buying a second expensive book we don't really want, waiting an agonizing hour in the sweltering heat for a tiny scoop of ice cream, or buying a luxury vehicle just to get a few free oil changes, the absence of financial cost blinds us.
It creates a fog.
Yes, it blinds us to the real cost of the transaction, because in the end, we always pay.
We always pay.
If we aren't paying with our wallets, we are paying with our valuable time. We are paying with our compromised health. We are paying with our better judgment. And we are paying with massive missed opportunities.
So the practical, everyday takeaway for you listening to this deep dive right now is a call to mindfulness.
Exactly.
Tomorrow or later today, you are going to encounter the word free. It will be in your inbox, on a billboard, or in a grocery store aisle. And when you see that magical, dangerous word, you need to stop. You need to short-circuit the glitch.
Take a breath.
Look at the offer and explicitly ask yourself, what am I actually paying for this?
Because there is always a cost. Always. You have to force yourself to overcome that initial evolutionary emotional surge and apply ruthless, rational scrutiny.
It's hard to do.
It takes effort. It takes a moment of discipline, but I promise you, it will save you money, it will save you time, and it will save you a lot of buyer's regret.
It is about regaining control of your own decision-making process.
Exactly. Now that you know how much free is really costing you in the commercial world, you might be sitting there thinking you've got it all figured out.
You might.
You understand how to navigate the marketplace, you know the corporate tricks, you know how to spot the cognitive glitches. But what happens when the cold, hard, calculating rules of the financial marketplace crash head-on into the warm, fuzzy, emotional rules of your personal life?
That is where things get truly complicated.
Next time, we are going to explore exactly that collision. We'll look at why offering to pay your mother-in-law $50 for cooking a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner won't make her happy. It will absolutely ruin the holiday and probably get you kicked out of the house.
Oh, that's going to be a good one.
We're going to dive into the clash between social norms and market norms. Until then, keep questioning your choices, watch out for the word free, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.